children, I'll tell you the news. Don't worry about the names or dates, you already know it's true. Your doctor hates your baby, the prime minister's a ghost, and all them folks are sailing here 'cause they're in love with boats. Superfoods can save us from all our evil sin. JFK and Elvis own a bar in Wisconsin. And vaccinations were created by the CIA to steal votes from Bernie Sanders and turn your babies gay. So click the link you think you'd like and get tooled for a fight against those lefty fascist communists who are leaning too far right.
Hi and welcome to Not Another Fake Newscast. I'm Paul.
And I'm Jerry. And we're Not Another Fake Newscast. I don't know if you've heard of us.
And we're back. But I know say that every time we're back, but
literally every time we record.
I know. Because it does feel like, because the interviews have been coming thick and fast through the Corona experience, as we're calling it.
Like a pent-up ejaculation.
I jizzing all over your ears with interviews.
Coming in your ears. So we're Not Another Fake Newscast, and if this is the first time you've ever listened to us, then I presume you've stopped already.
Our intros are usually much better.
But yeah, we're available at notanotherfakenewscast.com.
At PGMcast on Facebook and Twitter. You can drop us an email at info@notanotherfakenewscast.com.
And we're also available on like YouTube and stuff. If you go on any place that podcasts are available and you just put in hashtag NAFNC, you're going to find us. YouTube as well. And we're also available on Patreon. If you want to donate to the show and keep it going, that would be great too. It's www.patreon.com/PGMcast. Today's a roundup. And yeah, if anybody who doesn't know what we do normally, we talk about politics, we talk about news, we talk about the stories of the day. We try and sort of dig a little bit deeper and look behind the sort of narratives that are prevalent and see what the truth of the matter is. Sometimes we just display our own flagrant biases. We try not to, but yeah, that's basically the long and short of it. But for those who are fully aware of what we do, thanks for coming back. Hello, fuckers. How's it going?
Yeah, we've been, for our roundups, we've been relatively quiet over the last few months because up until the last maybe 3-4 weeks, there has been, news has been solely on the coronavirus. I mean, other things have been happening in the world, but essentially we have been in lockdown and the rest of the world has also been in lockdown.
Yeah, and then we've had our own families and stuff to deal with in that as well. You don't always I don't know about you, Paul, but it's been quite intense. Like you're quite intensely in your own house all the time, and then you're dealing with kids and maybe your other half, and it's just all a bit. Your anger levels are just slowly rising until your pressure valves are way to fucking pop. Maybe that's just me. And
then no, I totally get it. And then when you look at the news, it's no cheery. Do you know what I mean? It's no been grand. It's been that doesn't help add to the stress of life.
Yeah. So if anybody they're struggling with the whole lockdown situation, the coronavirus thing, mental health problems, make sure you speak to somebody. Don't let it just manifest and build up and fucking pop one day. You know, look after yourself. Speak to people. You've got friends out there, I'm sure. And if not, fucking drop us a line and we'll give you terrible life advice.
Terrible life advice. I can give you a list of things that I'll do on a night out that you shouldn't, if it makes you feel any better. So what we got first, Jared?
Well, I mean, I suppose because it's close to home and so recent, I think we should probably start off by talking about the kind of multiple stabbing murders. Well, not murders, actually. It ended up it's worked out okay, but certainly was reported at the time by the BBC that 3 people had been killed in Glasgow on Friday. So basically it was at the Park Inn in Glasgow in the city centre, and a Sudanese refugee asylum seeker who was being temporarily housed in the Park Inn in Glasgow stabbed like 6 people, including a police officer, and it was all of a sudden the attention was on Glasgow, and it was quite weird for us, I suppose. We're kind of used to seeing these so-called terrorist incidents or whatever happening outside of Scotland, really, you know.
Yeah, very, very rarely do we see something. Do we see something that is essentially, in the event there is any violence of any large scale, if it is even clashes with the police or it is something that gets a bit wild, it's generally on the sectarian end of this.
To do with our own
it's to do with internal, like, sectarianism and internal kind of xenophobia for each side of the country. Like, I don't know if you can call it xenophobia if you're only fucking 30, 40 mile the other direction, but I mean, essentially it is like that. It's much more internal. So this was obviously also just off the back of the events in Reading.
Yeah. So, and lots. I mean, first of all, let's get to the truth of the matter. So the suspect who is now dead, who was shot dead during sort of course of the incident and the way the incident played out, was a guy called Badruddin Abdallah Adam. He was Sudanese. He had, along with about 100 other asylum seekers, been moved into the Park Inn in Glasgow during the coronavirus pandemic at the beginning of lockdown. All of these people were in kind of temporary short-term accommodation rentals throughout the city, and somebody within the local authority made the decision early doors that these people would all be moved and housed in hotels. We've already seen a young Syrian man the week previously in Glasgow hung himself in his hotel room in the Maclay Hotel, I think it was. And, you know, there's been a lot of reports of a lot of them suffering from PTSD, from mental health problems, not been getting very well looked after in these hotels. Their meals, like, have kind of been fucking inedible. No social distancing enforced at meal times and stuff like that. No access to, like, decent Wi-Fi or phone calls. Their money had recently been stopped. They're supposed to get £5 a day. They weren't getting their funding or anything like that either. And they've been locked in this hotel with nothing to do. I know that a lot of the charity groups and pressure groups that have been, are activist groups and stuff, support workers who have been dealing with them, have been kind of complaining that, you know, some of their mental health was deteriorating, that they needed support, they needed some counselling, they needed to speak to people, and it seems to have been a bit of a pressure cooking environment.
Can I also say that there's maybe a perceived bias that people have got that because they're put up in hotels, like they're in a relatively nice environment. See, for someone who did a lot of travelling for work for a long time and spent lots of consecutive days in hotels, like jumping out for a little bit but then being in the hotels the whole time, like, see if you're there and you don't want to be there, like, so if you're there and you're there because of circumstance rather than because you've went out your way to book to be in a hotel. Hotels aren't always the greatest place. Like, they're quite dreary and quite depressing and lonely places. Like, hotels are lonely places when you're not there. But like, if you're not there like a stag do or there with your family or there on holiday, a hotel's quite a lonely environment. It's
having said all that, I don't want it to sound like we're like essentially giving the guy a free pass for stabbing loads of folk, right? Obviously, we at NAFNC, we at Not Another Fake Newscast, do not condone stabbing. That is something that we will stand by.
It's one of our stances. It's one of our stances.
Unless you're a cunt. But generally speaking, we're against stabbing.
But what I mean is with the current climate that we're in, with the current environment, with all the pressures that we did just speak about there, if you've got that added environment of being locked in a relatively plain box for a lot of the time, like, it's like it can be easily perceived as like a holiday because it's a hotel rather than a hotel and a prison cell are now a million miles away from each other.
No,
You're locked in
I
for
mean,
days.
true.
Like when you're locked in for days.
It's, yeah, I mean, in a situation when you can't even leave, it's like being offshore almost for me, but without actually any of the work or anything to like keep your mind occupied. You know what I mean? It's just, you're just stuck somewhere. Now, the reason that we were kind of talking over the situation a lot is because essentially the alarm was raised. The relevant authorities were notified here that there were issues for a lot of these young men, not just in the Park Inn, but in the various places they've been housed in Glasgow. And, you know, somebody has failed here, you know, and I don't know whether it's at the fault of local government or the national government at the moment, but certainly somebody has failed here. There's been a big failing, and I think, you know, I don't know if there's, at the moment, it's still kind of unraveling. I don't know whether there's going to be an inquiry or something into this, but I think that definitely the sort of, and I would also say that probably in normal times, it might have been handled better, you know, because, and it wouldn't have been in such an awful environment that these people were in, etc. But it does seem that because of everything else that's been going on, they've kind of been left to the side, discarded, the resources haven't been there, and they've been allowed to fall through the cracks, and that's led to this.
I would also like to reiterate again, like, all of the things that we're saying are in no way, shape or form, don't want anybody to perceive that we're saying, oh, this is why he's done it so we can understand or anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was, the man had mental health issues, and there was, like you said, PTSD or something similar, where he had broke, where the situation had broken and pushed him over the edge. It's not been treated as a terrorist incident. It's not been treated. It's like your classic American lone wolf with mental issues, rather than.
I mean, you say that, but has been a lot of, you know, dog whistling from the usual suspects.
Fucking man, I'm going to straight up say it. So Nigel Farage, he is in the nicest, but like, do you know what? I know probably, like, we try and be. The guy was an absolute cunt with the post that he put out. There's no black and white about it. He put out a post that was not even. You couldn't class it as a dog whistle. I mean, it was essentially, as long as there is immigrants coming into the UK and our borders are open, people are going to feel unsafe because foreign folk are going to attack us, is essentially the post that he put out.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly dangerous from a man who has such a following of a specific demographic. Like, it's way beyond dog whistling. It's just like standing outside shouting your dog's name at that point.
Well, I mean, he essentially said that, you know, it's just another example of an asylum seeker coming here for a free ride. I mean, I don't know, as an advert for asylum seekers being shut in a hotel with limited resources and then, like, going so mental you stab hundreds of folk and then being shot dead by the police isn't the greatest advert for some sort of fucking holiday.
No, it's certainly not.
You know, I would say I was an asylum seeker deciding where I was going to go. I wouldn't think, well, that looks pretty good. You know what I mean? So I think his logic's a bit twisted in that respect.
There is, and there's a lot of other people that are using terminology that is absolutely incorrect. So people are calling the people in question in Park Inn like illegal immigrants, and I find myself having to explain to people, it's like, we know they're there, right? So I don't know if you know what illegal immigrants are, right? But essentially, if the government put them in the room, you can't class it. I mean, you can class them as many other things, but you can't class them as illegal immigrants, because for all intents and purposes, they aren't. Yeah, they haven't illegally immigrated there, and the connotation of illegal immigrant is essentially a person who is here without papers, living their life. Do you know what I mean? That is what the idea of an illegal immigrant is.
Snuck in.
Snuck in and now managed to get themselves a job, or getting paid cash in hand and keeping money out tax. And you know, that's the especially from the alt-right side of you, that's the way that they shape it. Like, you know, coming over here, sneaking in, getting all our money, no paying any tax, using our health service. It's not really the same when you're an asylum seeker that the government know about and put you up in a room. That's not an illegal immigrant.
No, it's entirely legal, and it's actually classed as a human right, the right to seek asylum, you know, because you're being persecuted in your own country or whatever. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who'll say, well, he was in France first. Why did he not claim asylum in France, and all the kind of usual stuff you get? To be honest, like, there is an element where I have a wee bit of sympathy with that point of view. You know, like you do kind of think to yourself sometimes, well, you know, why are other European countries allowing them to pass through their borders? Because they kind of know that they're going to head here. Is that a fair statement, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I understand the sentiment, certainly. Whether or not I have any agreement with it, like, because my biggest problem with that is I actually don't know the individual asylum seeker numbers for each of the other European countries. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know proportionately how many more. Like, if it turns out that everyone is getting like 15% of the asylum seekers that are making their way to Europe, or 20% of the asylum seekers, then we're just all getting the same amount of asylum seekers. Do you know what I mean?
Like, I mean, which is kind of what should happen. But then it's the same thing as the issue with distribution throughout the country of the UK itself. Like, if we had 1,000 asylum seekers coming a year and they were all distributed equally amongst the constituencies of the UK, then it would be at the most a small handful of people in each constituency. It would be easy for them to integrate, or certainly they would have to, you know, but this isn't what happens. What tends to happen is that they get pulled into low-income areas. Interestingly, tends to be areas who don't vote Conservative. They tend to, because they're not going to put them in the doorsteps of their own voters, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I imagine it would be a solid 20 at least Tory constituencies that would be raging if they got like 30 asylum seekers put into their areas. You know what I mean? Like,
so they tend to go to inner cities, which tend to not vote Tory across the country. Most of the inner city areas are Labour voting or SNP voting in Scotland, certainly. Perhaps Liberal Democrats if they're mental. And
if they're a bit watery in their opinions.
yeah. If they think Joe Swinson's a real person. So yeah, it becomes, and that then allows them to point the finger and say, oh, look at all these immigrants who are in your area. You should vote for us because we're against immigration.
You also create mad. You also create the mad environments that the racists complain about. Right? Racists will complain about how all the immigrants are all in the one place and they all stick to themselves and they all have their own standalone community. But if you've taken 300 people from, say, Syria and you've put them in like Sighthill in Glasgow, there's 300 people they can talk to who have got a rough idea of what they're going through, and that's about it. So they're going to have a community. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're going to.
They're going to go, oh, I wonder what wee Jimmy thinks about my predicament.
I could take a stab in the dark.
yeah. Let's not talk about stabbings. So this is what happened. The right wing fucking jumped on it. It was all a bit real because it was close to home. But I think essentially the bottom line is, it wasn't a terrorist attack, and nobody's even claimed it as a terrorist attack. Like ISIS ISIS don't even want this one.
I know, that's it. That's how far for a terrorist attack it is. ISIS, who said originally, look, if you say it was us, we'll claim it. They're not even claiming it. They're not even.
Maybe it's because he didn't kill him. They're like, fuck, he was shite.
Maybe. I mean, that might be the thing. But the danger is you had the news. You had pretty much all the news channels reporting very early on that there had been 3 deaths, or it looked like there had been 3 murders, and it's like, in the nicest possible way, like. So see the videos that were, I actually seen the tweet from the person who was in Glasgow who filmed the video that was used by everyone of the police going through the door. And I read through the entire comment section and watched BBC, Daily Mail, The Express, The Times, The Herald, all ask for permission to use the video, and it was like her husband or other half or boyfriend. I might have just thinking that it was the man she was with who I got from the way that they were talking about it, that the pair of them were together, and she had said it's okay for them to all use it. But they had all just asked for permission for that one video, which only actually showed some fucked up angle of people like running up a set of stairs into the Park Inn Hotel.
It was the only footage that they had, though, right?
It was.
And this is I guess this is the kind of problem with the digital age and news and stuff, and the nature of it. The clamour to be first. It's like much more important to be first than to be accurate your reporting, you know. So it was a priority for the BBC to be the first people to be like, there's been 3 deaths, because if they then get that right, then it's kudos to them because they got it right. But if they didn't and it was completely incorrect, there's no real comeback. And like, I mean, me and you are talking about it, but I can't imagine that there's a lot of people that really gave a fuck that they reported that wrong, you know.
Well, that's it. In Reading, we've seen the very similar thing. I mean, it was reported as a terrorist attack flat, like fucking, like within seconds of it happening. And it's because we now live in this kind of 24-hour news cycle environment where, like, they can just say shit, and then because they're going to be reporting on it for the next, like, 12 hours, they can keep amending the shit that they've said. So by the time that you get to the end of the cycle, they've got the story as right as it can be. But they could have said any nonsense at the start of it to start the news because they didn't know anything. So it's just like, it just builds on it.
Like, why not just wait till you know the facts of the matter? Like, why this desire? I mean, and it's on social media as well. So, like, if people are just going to, like, normal members of the public will just tweet bullshit about what's happening on social media. Why not just leave that to them? That's like the public's job to do that, right? And then once you know the facts, then report the news. You know, that's what you're being publicly funded to do. And it's not like, I don't want to pick on the BBC as such. It's just that I happened to get a notification directly to my phone.
Oh, there was a pile of them that done it. They were all as bad as each other. Like, for the most part, all the major media outlets were all reporting broken bits of information that was happening. And, like, there's an argument, I'm sure, somewhere down the line, especially in the current environment. So because of where we are right now regarding the Black Lives Matter movements and the protest clashing and the statue protector people and all that kind of stuff.
What was that? What was that? Your Black Lives Matter?
Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. Right.
No.
No. There was a wee hashtag kicking over for a couple of days.
Tell me about it. I mean, it sounds a bit specific. Don't all lives matter?
Yeah, that's what a lot of wrong people say. That's what a lot of people say.
We'll get to that.
But yeah, so I mean, you've then got very real dangers where, like, it only takes someone deciding to be fucking. I'm not saying that it's not happened yet, but like somebody to decide that they're going to go full vigilante on this. You know what I mean? You've got a pile of statue protectors standing down at George Square, which is if you were running, I mean, there are a lot of those lads that were at the statue protecting when they're running, but if you were walking fast,
weren't they capable of running?
No, but you could have been there in a couple of minutes. You know what I mean? You're not that far from there. So all it takes is them to get the information and think that there's some terrorist guy down there and feeling brave and brave on booze, you know what I mean? Like, and fucking caught up in the moment and then running around and doing something mad and escalating that. And that's because they're getting false, mad news. And like I said, it's not happening yet, but especially if we take that idea and then you project it to somewhere like America where you've got a disproportionate amount of idiots with guns and stuff. Like, someone decides that they're going to go and be a hero and start fucking, you know what I mean? Like, how good, that's not going to create a good environment at all. Like, that's not going to create any positives. And
no.
And there has to be questions asked to the media about if them reporting first is more important than them reporting wrong and possibly escalating or creating another problem. And in fact, on the back of that, I read an amazing post underneath one of the Twitters. I'll never find it. Right. It was actually the video when I was talking about how all the news places asked for it, one of the first posts underneath it was a member of the police who deals with events like that. And he said, can you please stop posting these videos because in every instance...
Organises them.
Aye, like he organises like mass stabbings.
It's an events organiser.
He's an events organiser for the police. But no, he was saying that one of the problems that they've been seeing recently is that these big events, when media starts reporting on them, they're then... So in this case, it was a lone guy with mental issues. But in the event, it was
stuff like the stuff at George Square.
Aye, if it's stuff that's organised, then suddenly what you're doing is you're giving people a live feed of what the police are doing. Like, so, like, if you're holed up in a hotel and you know the police are like standing at the front and on the roof, you've got social media telling you that. Do you know what I mean? You now know where they're moving. And he's like, please stop posting these videos because all you're doing is giving people information. And at that point, there was the fear that it was like a terrorist act. And if it was a terrorist act, then how many people were like feeding them information? And that's, again, something that has to fall on the onus of, the media platforms can regulate the public doing it by pulling stuff, but you can't really regulate. The media have to take some onus in the fact that they have to regulate themselves to make sure that they're not providing information and pictures and videos and stuff like that. That can
because it gives it a certain amount of kudos. It gives it a certain amount of believability to the general public. You know, it gives it credence if it's coming from the BBC or ITV or Sky or whoever. So yeah. I guess that's pretty much a thorough fucking going over of last Friday, and obviously our thoughts go out to the victims. We're glad that everybody seems to be in recovery and stable. Yeah, so we hope that nobody has any major issues off the back of it. Although I can imagine getting stabbed probably fucks you up a little bit.
I mean, like,
that's my. And if you take nothing else from that episode, let that be your takeaway.
Don't get stabbed.
Don't get stabbed. So, I mean, I suppose, yeah, that kind of brings us on to the Black Lives Matter thing, because, I mean, we saw the kind of running battles with the cops and whatever that were happening with the statue protectors in Glasgow. Obviously, it started, for anyone who has been living under a rock for the past few weeks, guy called George Floyd got knelt on and fucking killed by a on-duty cop while all his cop mates stood with their hands in their pockets and watched it fucking happen.
Whoa, I have to stop you there, Jerry, because I have seen in the internet that is not an off-duty cop, but he is, in fact, a crisis actor. Oh, wait, maybe
on duty. I said on duty, didn't I?
All right, either or, doesn't matter. The point is, he's still a crisis actor according to a whole subsection of the internet, which he wasn't. Right, it's just so we're clear. Like, there's no actual evidence.
That's right, because one of the posts I saw was of a guy accepting an Emmy and them saying, "Look, it's this actor," and you're like, I think if they're going to fake something, they're not going to pick somebody who's on stage accepting an Emmy. You know, because that would be really stupid.
Aye, it would be. It's like, who was it that attacked the guy? It was Forrest Whitaker. Seems like a weird choice, to be honest. Somebody was probably going to recognise him.
Yeah, he did it. He did his. He did his. What was the leader? What was the leader of Uganda called again? He played him in The Last King of Scotland.
See, I was just going to say The Last King of Scotland to answer your question.
Idi Amin. Yeah, he did it when he was killing him, he did his Idi Amin voice because he was like going for it. I don't know why we make jokes about that. Fuck.
Anyway, no. But the point I'm making is like the idea that people are spreading about it's a crisis actor, and then they're like listing some fucking. Actually, it's damaging on so many levels. First and foremost, there's a guy who accepted a BAFTA who is now being accused of fucking choking George Floyd to death.
I think it was an Emmy, but yeah.
Aye.
But yeah, I mean, right. So, I mean, first of all, it was a fucking horrific incident, horrible. Secondly, we are firmly in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. I think it's fair to say, yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We completely understand that, you know, this has been a catalyst, really. It's been a catalytic, fucking hell, a catalytic event.
This is the catalytic converter. And on the upside, Black Lives Matter, and there's less pollution.
There's less emissions. So yeah.
That's cool.
But yeah, like, there's been a massive undercurrent of racism in, not even undercurrent a lot of the time in America for a number of years, and in the UK too, but it's obviously different cultures and stuff. You've had a president in the US since 2016 who's been quite overtly racist a lot of the time, which has empowered a lot of racist people to act in a similar fashion. You have a situation where law enforcement in the US have been deliberately targeted for infiltration by white supremacist movements, where the FBI have written reports on such, where ex-white supremacists who've kind of moved away from that and have been trying to educate the public about the white supremacist movement have come out and said that they were deliberately trying to infiltrate law enforcement in the US. So when you see stuff like this happening, it's a catalytic event, which just, especially when you've got the coronavirus thing happening, where black people have.
I was going to say is the other problem that you've got is there is, especially in America, much less so in the UK, but you've got a massive militarisation of the police, which then means that on top of there being white supremacists and on top of there being all this tension, the guys who are standing in the front line are standing in the front line in fucking tanks with like full blown military gear. Do you know what I mean? Like, as in, it's not a. When you watch demonstrations from around the world and the police are standing there and some are in riot gear and some are just wearing their police uniforms or whatever, it's very different to the images you see from America that are almost like something you would see in a political uprising in South America or in the Middle East. You know what I mean? The guys who are facing off in the streets are essentially, for all intents and purposes, military trained, wearing military equipment and like.
And the big difference between the US and the UK is that there's obviously racist cops, racist police in the UK. There are. I mean, there's racists in every walk of life, essentially, statistically. But at least the racist police in the UK don't have guns, or most of them don't have guns, whereas the vast majority of cops, if not all cops in the US, have guns and are carrying guns all the time, which makes it a lot easier to kind of follow through on your fucking violence.
And this is one of the things that when people start talking about, there's a lot of arguments that have came off the back of Black Lives Matter movement this time round, where people are saying like, it's not as racist. Or for one, I seen someone saying, but 50% of all crimes, he said crimes and then he said murders. I don't really know where they were going with it, either or. It doesn't really matter for the point. It was like 50% of all of them are committed by black people in the US. First and foremost, that's not true. But secondly, even if as I pointed out to him, if the statistics he's pulling are the people who have been tried for murder and have went to jail, like, unless you're producing the evidence of how many crimes are committed that aren't solved, or how many crimes go to court and are found not guilty or are found inconclusive evidence and that type of stuff, then you don't actually have a full picture. So all you're doing is telling me they put lots and lots and lots of black people in jail in America, and that's kind of what the black people are saying. You know what I mean? Like all you're doing is reaffirming it.
Yeah, and what I was going to say earlier was, because of the specific situation that we're all in, caused by the COVID-19 situation, there's been like massive racial tension bubbling up even over and above what's kind of naturally been happening because of the political situation in America and because of, outside influence and stuff as well, stoking that, because of inside influence stoking it. But, the fact that people of colour, BAME people, BAME, whatever you want to call it, are much more likely to be frontline workers, to be poor, to be on the poverty line, to be more susceptible to COVID, means that they've been dying at higher levels, and also that they've been much more likely to have been affected by the mass unemployment which has happened in the US and in the UK. And in the midst of this, in the midst of statues getting toppled in Brighton, Bristol, fucking always say Brighton, you had the Tory government sort of basically trying to quash or delay a report on how people of colour had been affected by COVID in the UK, right? That's
what I was going to say. I mean, it's like, don't make like don't be fooled by the fact that they did release the report. They were pushing back on releasing the report because they knew what the report said, and they were scared it was going to be used to incite more violence or more tensions, like in the UK. Like, but the thing is, we shouldn't be in an environment in our country where the government are like, I'm not releasing a report which could help at least the communities understand what's happening, or at least prove the disparity that the communities are feeling, at least actually alleviate some of that stress rather than create some of the stress. But they were so scared that it would cause a negative impact. And there's an argument to say, well, if they had fucking dealt with it right in the first place, there wouldn't have been the negative impact. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, and also, I mean, because they've been the party of government for the last 11 years, like, it's on them, and there's nobody else they can blame. Apart from, like, I mean, he could say, oh, Nick Clegg and his mates were part of it for 5 years. But I don't think they'd be buying that.
I'd say that as well. just so people don't forget. Don't fucking forget.
But yeah, I mean, so yeah, you've had the whole Black Lives Matter thing going on, which has, yeah, we've seen statues getting pulled down, we've seen running battles, we've seen fucking statue protectors fucking all around the country.
The best thing that exists on
your dad's a statue protector.
Your dad protects statues. like the idea that like even when people were putting up posts, like there's a famous picture that kicks about. I say famous, it's not fucking existed long enough to be famous, but a picture that was bounced around quite a lot of some mutant that was wearing like a Friday the 13th type hockey mask with St. George's cross on it. Fuck. And like somebody had just posted underneath it, like, that's somebody's dad. like just think of it like, oh, what are you going to do? Dad? Oh, can you go get me my racist hockey mask? I'm going to go.
Fuck's sake, no.
I'm going to go down and make sure that they don't pull down the statue of some racist guy. Like,
I mean, and you know, specifically in Glasgow, where we have divides and stuff anyway, but it was very specifically divided. You know, it wasn't a whole diverse range of people.
Are you suggesting it was a certain sided offence that made up the majority of the people protecting statues?
I am saying that, Paul.
I mean, there was.
Don't get me wrong. There was a lot of people came up from England as well to get involved in it.
The same ones that probably have anyway, but they are that entire crowd. Like, I have witnessed friends of friends and friends all arguing on Facebook about things like, why would you bring in like my football team into this? And it's like, why are they all wearing their fucking football team's colours? You're mutant. Like,
they were singing loyalist orange songs. They were singing Rangers songs and stuff as well at George Square. You know, there's plenty of footage online to show that. Exactly the same way that it was happening in the aftermath of 2014 when there was running battles in George Square. It seems to be a theme. I don't know. Mind when they went down to Manchester. Just saying, you know, there's definitely an element there. And by the way, there's fucking shitty fucking elements within the Celtic support too.
Oh, I mean, that's the thing as well. Like, so both sides of that sectarian divide have absolute fucking idiots. But there is a problem.
Seems to be more on one side though.
Well, depending on, so I would say there's probably equal amounts of idiots. It's just where their idiot sits on the scale, like what type of idiot they are and where they fight their battles. So, for example, there is definitely, regardless of what any individual will argue with you about, we can prove through statistics that, like, for example, the BNP's newsletter was sold. And the largest individual sales of any given week was outside Ibrox when they were playing at home, right? So we know that. So that means that there is and the BNP have definite racist and fascist undertones, we'll call it, and that's me being nice. And what that means because the club didn't make an active effort to stop that shit dead, to say it wasn't going to be happening there and do everything they can literally do in their power to prevent it. It's a complacency from that side of the fence.
But I will say this, like, I've got loads of fucking really good mates who are Rangers fans who are sound as fuck. No, and who listen to this show also, Paul. I'm sure. I'm sure
laughing because that sentence is like, I can't be racist. I've got black mates. Yeah. You know what I mean?
But, and I'm sure there's a lot of supporters of Rangers Football Club who are not our friends and who listen to this show. I hope there are. All I would say to you is, you know, when you hear shit in the fucking stadium said or by your mates or whatever, like, challenge them. Don't let them get away with that shit, because we all need to be stepping up and challenging behaviour that we kind of come across in our day-to-day life. I've been guilty of it in the past in my working environment. You like letting shit slide and no saying anything because you don't want to fucking put your head above the parapet or whatever. But, you know, we need to...
If we're all doing that, then nobody's actually preventing it, and then all you're doing is letting it, you're essentially complacent in it being spread. Yeah. And the thing is, like, so even though we were talking about it from a football club point of view, and like I said, I grew up on the other side of the fence, and I know lots of fucking idiots that would be on the other side, lots of fucking idiots on the other side of the fence. But what I will say is, there is a definite connection between what we were seeing and the Orange Order. I'm happy to be on fucking record saying that. Do you know what I mean? Like, the amount of people who were there, who were flying, who were clearly members of the Orange Order in various scenarios because of the way that they were, the flags that they had and the banners that they had, and you know what I mean? Like
and the songs they were singing.
And the songs they were singing, exactly. Penny Arcade. No, but,
and there was photographers who were attacked at George Square, and I've seen videos and I've read first-hand accounts from a lassie who was literally battered and kicked and punched by a bunch of guys just because she was standing, and she was standing like with other press taking photos. There was a guy, Chinese photographer, Tommy Gaken Wan, who was battered and had his camera, like tried to take the camera off him and stuff, attacked, racially abused, called a chink and stuff like that by these guys. So
his story's actually very unpleasant, like the way they stood around him and they were goading him into doing something to take a picture so they could then use it as a reason to attack him. Like, I mean, they were actively singling people out and attacking them. And it's the same as stuff that we were seeing during... Like, another thing that we have to also mention is during the Black Lives Matter protests, the police in the US were doing something very similar to reporters. Do you know what I mean? They were outright attacking reporters. They were attacking the media. And at any given point when there's groups, regardless of it being police or it being counter-protesters or any of that shit, I'm not really great. Happy we call them counter-protesters, but I'm just using the label that has been used for them.
Yeah. Both sides.
There is... That's that's super like anti-fascists. No, I mean that's a fascist.
anti-racist or anti-rapist opposers. Yeah, BBC.
BBC, and I believe I'm going to say Daily Mail, but it was one of them. But it's like anti-fascists. That would be a fascist. That's what we used to call fascists. Like, so that was what was Hitler and that. Mussolini, one of the world leaders in anti-fascism.
Call him a fascist, mate. Well, they might sue me. Oh, all right.
Well,
have the fucking balls to let them fucking try and sue you.
I mean, I reckon that it's a tough push for any company or individual, unless they can outright prove that they're not a fascist, that they've gone to court to argue that they're an anti-fascist and you're an anti-fascist. It's going to really not work out well for them in the media. Like, it's just no.
Well, do you remember, it was Frankie Boyle, actually, I think, what was called a racist by one of the papers said that he'd said a racist joke or something like that, and he took them to court and won the court case, so that when he done his next tour, the like headline underneath it was Scotland's only confirmed non-racist comedian or something like that.
Very nice. But the thing is, but the point I was making is, see any groups that start to suppress the media, that's because they're hiding something.
Well, I mean, also, like, you could argue that the sort of, I think we can probably agree that police who are fucking getting quite into the fucking idea of battering Antifa or Black Lives Matter protesters probably vote Trump. Can we agree on that?
I can't imagine a huge amount of like Democrat, like a huge amount of
liberals.
Like ex Obama voting cops pure choking to beat down the Black Lives Matter groups. You know what I mean? Like, and I might be wrong. Like, some of them are going to be there just doing their job and doing their duty.
So you could argue that the kind of respect for the press which I think would have been fairly prevalent across the board in society, even in like 10 years ago, even less than that, probably. Like, people have been emboldened to sort of feel negatively about the press because they're constantly being told that the press are liars, that the media are liars, that everything's fake news. You know, as we know, we fucking bang the drum for it all the fucking time, but Duggan, Surkov, Cummins, Trump, Bannon, it's all about blasting the fucking horn that the media tell lies and the media are not to be trusted, and then it becomes so much easier to just deny and lie, which we're kind of going to get on to next, on a number of fucking controversies that have enveloped the Tory party recently.
But the other thing is, there was reports of the police destroying medical drops that had been put out for protesters who had been getting injured and stuff. There's also, and this is when you start crossing the line where even in horrendous war zones, like we've interviewed people who have worked in like literally the arse end of hell in the middle of the worst scenario you can be in. Like they've got fucking bombs getting dropped on and that, and they'll still get. I mean, some they'll get maybe roughed up, they'll maybe get a shit time, but they'll still, for the most part, get a pass. If you are medical or if you are media, you generally are.
There's some things that are supposed to be sacred, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, like, you have to be a certain level of stupid, right? Because see the people who are putting out the news that you're not an absolute fucking walloper. And it's not going to be the guy you just shot in the face with pepper spray bullets. Do you know what I mean? Like, his next story is not going to be pro-police in any way, shape, or form because.
Yeah. But like this, but like society, or certainly the side of society that votes for these people, have been repeatedly told that the media aren't worth a shit, that the CNN tell lies, fake news, you know, and like going
about during BLM.
It was, and to be fair, there's an element of that on the left wing side of things as well, you know.
An element. It's wild. Like, I can sit in a room with somebody who is right-wing. I mean, it doesn't happen that much, but I can sit in a room with somebody who's got quite right-wing views and quite left-wing views, and both of them will tell me that the BBC are biased towards
the other side.
The other side. Hi. Like, and it's like, well, I mean, these all believe that. Like, these are, like, I mean, Dan Grimes posted on Twitter, like, the other day how he's now took up part of the defund BBC movement because they're biased and they're pushing an agenda. It's like, Dan, I would agree with that, but I'm not 100% certain I agree with the same way you agree with it. Like, I reckon I could show that they're pushing an agenda for the Tories.
But you know that defund the BBC hashtag and all, and Twitter accounts owned by some wee cunt who's like the chair of the Glasgow Uni Tory fucking council or whatever the fuck it's called. Tory, young Tory cunts. Cunty Tory young, I don't know, something about that.
The YTC.
Just some wee posh wank. Anyway, so
he's got a pure West End accent.
I bet he has funding from some sort of mad right wing organisation like Grimesy does. But yeah, I'm not going to go into that right now.
I think we should defund the BBC. Like, that's how they talk, because that's...
I had such a wild night last night. We were having Jaeger bombs and it was absolutely mad. It was mental. I
just can't survive the next day without a glass of soya milk. I heard a girl say that at Mono. Which, by the way, is a vegan establishment for those who are not from Glasgow.
But yeah, I came on. I was going to look for something, but I can't remember what it was. What were we talking about 2 minutes ago?
Grimesy, defund BBC. No,
it was before that. I know what it was. It was because we were talking about, you know, the media being biased and left wingers saying that the media's right wing and right wingers saying the media's left wing. And it just really made me laugh, that one that you shared this morning, where Jonathan Gullis, the Conservative MP, had tweeted to say that Piers Morgan, one of Sir Keir's left-wing elite media cheerleaders, using the airwaves to push his boy because he'd tweeted about, the latest polling for the Labour leader being quite positive. Now, Piers Morgan is a lot of things. What I don't think he is a left-wing elite media cheerleader.
Oh, he's certainly not. I mean, actually, so I think it's well known for all our frequent listeners that me and Jerry are not Piers Morgan fans by any manner of means. But he replied to the MP, and he was just like, "I voted Conservative in the last election." Like, what are you talking about? like, I mean, I'm a fucking Tory.
I mean, the fact, that even that's dirty, even saying that. Like, but I think that's absolutely great. I mean, fuck. It's so annoying. So annoying having to praise that cunt.
Having to tag him in a post that I'm no calling him a dick. Like, writing at that post, just like, Piers Morgan is not a left wing. Oh God, is an asshole. Sorry, delete. No, is not a left wing cheerleader. Like,
and the worst thing about it is, I've just had this image of Piers Morgan in a cheerleader's outfit stuck in my head for like the past fucking 24 hours, man.
A tough wank.
Tough, really tough. But I'm a trooper.
I finished.
So. You were going to tell me about the Ivory Coast, man.
Oh, Wiz, and it's fucking, this isn't cheery.
The Côte d'Ivoire, if you will.
Yeah, that's what they call it. Right, so I need to give you
what the French called it when they took it over.
That's why we're French do it. You say take it over, I say straight up fucking stole. Swings around about really. It's, so there's a couple of things that, so this is why this matters to Black Lives Matter first, right? That when we talk about slavery ending, and so slavery has been I was going to say a buzzword, but I don't mean like that. But it's been trending, and it's been used a lot to talk about slave traders, to talk about Emancipation Proclamation. You know, what I mean, to talk about pretty much all the components that have built up all the civil rights movements across both countries. However, Nestle, who are a Swiss-owned company, but they are a fucking big multinational conglomerate who are heavy-rooted and actually finance both sides of the political parties in the US. Generally speaking, up until about 2016, they were always funding the Republicans more. From 2016, they started funding the Democrats more. But because Trump took an anti-globalization stance, I suppose, right? I imagine it's real tough for Nestle, based in Switzerland, to be justified. And the thing is, let's not pretend. If you're a company based in Switzerland,
you're probably built on Nazi gold, right?
You're historically, that's just exactly where I was going. You're historically no against the far right, so
No, they're neutral, Paul. They're neutral.
Neutrally,
both sides.
Neutral. They neutrally don't like anti-fascists, and they neutrally quite like taking money off fascists.
They neutrally like storing prized artifacts from Jewish people.
Like, their argument was they were keeping it for the Jewish people if they ever came back to get it.
Yeah, they'll just slide it out of one of their wee knives. Oh, look, there's all your art.
there's all your pictures.
I keep it in my little pocket knife.
So anyway, pretty much all the chocolate, a massive percentage of chocolate in the world comes from the Ivory Coast. Most people are kind of aware of that, right? So in 2001, it was brought to the attention of the world that, like, all your chocolate was coming from fucking slave labour, very much, like, or a disproportionate amount of chocolate was coming from child slave labour specifically. So a set of targets get put in place and agreed by the fucking Confectionery Guild of America. Made that up. That's not what they're called. But essentially, all the big, like, your Nestle's and Cadbury's and Hershey's and, the big companies.
Big
chocolate, which is actually just like a massive bar of chocolate.
I'm pretty sure it was a wrestler when it was sexual chocolate.
Sexual chocolate, it was, with Mark Henry. But essentially, so 2001, they said they've missed every target to reduce the numbers, right? So 2005, 2008, 2010 were all the targets. And by 2020, the aim was, I've actually got it written down here, so the aim was they had pledged to reduce the worst forms of child labour in West African supply chains by 70% by 2020, right? So by this year,
forms, just the worst.
They were just like, we can't.
Just tell them they can't fuck him anymore.
Well, pretty much. However, the new report that comes out at the end of this month that has been done by the US Department of Labour, right, shows that.
As in Jeremy Corbyn's US wing.
US Department of Labour. That's what it is. That for the last 10 years, it's increased. So the last 10 years, there's now more child labour, and they've managed to. They got to 2000.
Yeah, but it's not the worst kinds, Paul.
No, I think at this point it is.
Really? They've deliberately increased the worst kinds.
I mean, I think
because they're really good for profit.
It's just because you make more money. So, the University at the University of Chicago, there's a National Opinion Research Centre. They're called NORC, which, by the way, I would suggest they fix that. Main findings indicate the prevalence rate of children in child labour, proportion of children aged 5 to 17, right? And cocoa production in the agricultural households and cocoa growing areas of the Ivory Coast and Ghana increased between 2008 and 2009 and 2018 and 2019 from 31% in 2008-2009 to 44% in 2018 and 2019. The rate of hazardous child labour in cocoa sector between the same dates rose from 30% to 41%. Essentially, there's now at least 10% more children working in hazardous cocoa environments. But the bit that I found most fucking metal before we go into the other components of this is the big companies, so like Hershey, for example, or Nestle, the reason that they have found it so difficult to cut it down is they can only trace the source. I can't. They can only trace the source of the cocoa that they're using. About 24% of that cocoa, they know what farms it's coming from. So essentially 75% of the chocolate they're using, they don't know where it's coming from. I know. Yes.
Or they're making sure that they're as far removed from it as legally possible so that none of it comes back on them. But that is total bullshit.
I mean, essentially.
So which companies then? So which companies are producing chocolate from there?
Nestle and Hershey's were the two they're the two biggest.
Or Cadbury or Galaxy.
Well, so Cadbury's owned by Hershey now.
Right. So yes, then.
And Galaxy's owned by Mars. And Mars is the other. So Mars is the other one. Mars is the other one. I mean, Mars is owned by another company again, but essentially, Mars, Hershey, and Nestle are the ones that they use in this example. Cadbury's at the time would have been a British company at the start of all of this, but now is owned by Hershey.
So are Mars involved too? Because I just want to know. So I can't eat Galaxy either. That's cool.
No, you can't eat Galaxy.
Right. So everybody, don't eat any of their shit because they're cunts, right?
But it's really, I remember that's also like using Nespresso coffee machines.
Don't drink any of that muck anyway.
I just fucking no putting that near me anyway. But essentially, let's see if I can do this. So I then started reading. So in 2019, over a year ago now, right? The Washington Post done a thing about the cocoa child labourers and how Mars, Nestle, and Hershey pledged nearly 2 decades ago to stop using cocoa harvested by children, but yet they still haven't managed to do it. So another year has passed since then, and nothing has got any better. So you're not meant to be able to work on the cocoa plantations unless you're 19. But when they were interviewing people, the kids that were there were saying they were 15 and stuff. So Mars, the makers of M&M and Milky Way, can trace only 24% of its cocoa back to farms. Hershey can trace less than half, and Nestle can trace.
I'm going to say something. I'm going to say something here, though, right? In the UK, you could work on a farm when you were 16. So, like, to say that they can't work there till they're 19 and, oh my God, they're interviewing them when they're 15. You would interview somebody in the UK a week or 2 weeks before their 16th birthday to line them up for a job, and you wouldn't fucking consider it child labour, would you?
No, but at the same time, you also wouldn't be expecting that they were going to be out in the middle of a fucking rainforest with fucking machetes cutting down fucking. You know what I mean? Like a guy who's working in a.
No, I got a job in Marvel once.
just only put with a machete with no shoes on in the woods. I know a couple of lads that do that.
No, I mean, it's a weird thing to play devil's advocate on, but for me, there's a marked difference between
I get what you mean.
Somebody who's near an adulthood who would essentially be allowed to join the army in the UK and stuff like that, have sex, buy a lottery ticket. Is that still 16? I don't know. But well, like
the same kid started working at 10, if it makes it
that's that argument right out of the water. But
so he's been working for 5 years.
But I suppose this is kind of indicative of the situation in certainly politics in the Anglosphere, like in the English-speaking world, over the past sort of 45 years, where we were kind of steadily kind of chipping away, making progress towards some sort of consensus politics in terms of global relations, where we were sort of trying to improve things like global warming and child labour and fair trade and stuff. All of this is taking like a massive step back, and under Trump and under the Conservative Party in the UK, because there's so much madness going on domestically and internally in our own countries that there's very little focus from the media on what's going on elsewhere, because we don't have the fucking time for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I mean, in 2010, for example, when they were asked, none of the representatives for the large chocolate companies were willing to say that they could guarantee that any of their products didn't have cocoa coming from child labour.
Well, I'm not able to guarantee that. I'm not a massive fan of chocolate anyway, but
just to give you some other cheery numbers that come along with it. So they reckon there's about, in 2015, they reckon there was more than 2 million children that was engaged in dangerous labour in cocoa growing regions. What they're using to define dangerous, as opposed to like, all right, kind of conditions, I'm not really sure.
Is that the two technical terms? Dangerous and all right.
But like I said, so essentially your largest chocolate manufacturer in the world would pretty much make every single brand between Nestle, Mars and Hershey. Pretty much everything in America and most of the stuff that we eat here in the UK. There's all of them can only claim at the very most 50%, 49% essentially is, I think Hershey's is 49%. I said, yeah, so no, Nestle can claim 49%. Hershey's said that they can claim less than half. And
what, cocoa content?
No, where it's come from.
Oh, right, sorry.
And like I said, Mars can only trace 24% of its cocoa back to farms.
Because that's all they want to.
I would imagine so. So this at the point of this article, which was like it started last year, they were still talking about how they were aiming towards how they've invested something. There was at the top of this, I'm sure it tells you the exact figure. They had invested like £250 million or something into try and do this so far. But the industry as a whole generates like 103 billion in sales annually.
Ah, right.
And they've spent more than 150 million over 18 years to fix the issue. So they're not trying that hard.
No, they are definitely not. No,
they're not trying that hard. And so there's in this article as well, essentially it touches on a whole load of like bits of components. Like there's kids there that are there's 12 children, for example, they had spoke to who weren't there with parents, who were there just working as children labourers. I mean, they were slave labourers. They're not getting paid and stuff like that.
They've got no adults.
They've got unrecorded births. They don't have identification documents. They reckon 40% of the births there go unrecorded, and they just find themselves out there with their way into these farms
So it's almost like a plantation fucking scenario. Like, but
I mean, it's absolutely a plantation. There's actually a video that I'll try and find for you. I don't know if we've spoken about it before, but have you seen the video of the guy who brings a chocolate bar to Go-Go?
Because
and it's the first time they've never had it.
I think it's been posted on one of our previous episodes because we've spoken about it before.
I thought we had, but I couldn't remember if it was an episode or if it was just in our chat.
No, it was really cool.
And Nestle have also last month announced that they're going to stop utilising fair trade. So, you know,
they're rolling back on it?
It's a wild stance. I'm not making that up. I'm not making that up. They're now, so see,
fair trade. Fuck it.
So see your fair trade mark, your fair trade stamp that's on chocolate bars and all that shit, they've says that they're going to stop utilising the fair trade chains. They're meant to be putting in, I will say, for Nestle, they're meant to be putting in new deals and all that, and they still say they're going to try and help communities and all that sort of stuff, but they're not going to
try and do fairish trade, but fuck the fair trade thing. It's not possible. Better with the Waynes.
Also, one of the largest cocoa suppliers in the world, they're probably not a great group of guys, by the way. They're called Barry Callebaut. They're called Barry. They're first they're called
Barry.
Barry space Callebaut,
It's a surname though.
No, Barry is the first name, and Callebaut is the second name. Like Barry space Callebaut, like a name, like Barry.
But it's two surnames, probably like a double barrel.
It'll be like Stevie Barry,
like Johnson and Johnson.
I presume so. I'm guessing it's no like
Barry Goldman Mayer.
I imagine it's not like, my name's Barry Callebaut and I've got fucking cocoa for you.
You met Big Barry Callebaut?
Just fucking, he's what you the lad with the jacket full of fucking cocoa beans.
It's always in the pub with loads of bags of brown powder.
I thought he was a heroin dealer, turns out he's not. But they've said that they've got a commitment to make sustainable chocolate the norm by 2025. So in 5 years, they're going to reduce the fact that they're fucking... So it's going to be sustainable.
Aye, that's what I was going to say. Didn't they say, was there got to be child labour involved? Just it was got to be sustainable.
And they're going to lift over 500,000 cocoa farmers out of poverty. Now, I will say that I've just pointed out before, there's over 2 million children working as labourers. So lifting 500,000 cocoa farmers out of poverty is a start, but it's hardly it's hardly going to fix the problem. And
piecemeal.
Aye, and the reason that I'm bringing it up, when it came to my attention, the thing is, when we're talking about Black Lives Matter and you're talking about slavery and stuff like that, we are still actively, and the thing is, regardless of all the other products and all the other ways that you can find weird justifications and loopholes and all that kind of stuff for things you're buying, or it's not that stuff I'm buying. We are all buying fucking chocolate. We're all buying it off these companies, and these companies are taking the claim they don't know where they're getting their cocoa from. Well, imagine any other fucking big industry. Imagine fucking it's that is a.
Do you want to buy some strawberries, mate? Oh, where are they from? Don't know. Well, I don't want those strawberries then. Thank you very much.
Don't know who picked
them. Do I buy some of my chocolate? Well, I mean, I suppose that's the thing. It's a bar of chocolate. So you don't even go, where's it from? Like a fresh natural product in front of you, a pineapple, a mango, a fucking strawberry or whatever. You wouldn't buy that without asking, where's it from? Or it would have a thing on it saying it's for Poland or it's for Hungary or it's for Scotland or whatever. But I mean, I can't imagine there's a lot of mangoes for Poland. But anyway,
Scotland. The Scottish mangoes.
Pakistan has the best mangoes, just so you know. But yeah, like chocolate, we don't really ask questions, I suppose. And the fact that they're happy to just go, we don't know where it comes from. Like, if nothing else, it's incredibly irresponsible as a producer of food to not know what your supply chain is.
Well, that's it. I mean, like, if you were buying shrimp off somebody, if you were buying, like, fucking cooked shrimp off somebody and they were just like, I don't know where it came from, it came out of a bin. Like, it's so many.
All those cocoa beans could have been stored in a fucking pile of manure for all Nestle know is what they're saying.
Well, yeah, but that's it. I mean, this is a food product, like, and you expect, but clearly wrongly, but you
traceability.
You expect this and that, like, so see if you take a big, massive company that gets fucking slandered all the time for its terrible practices and like deforestation stuff like that, be like McDonald's, right? I was going to say at least, but like McDonald's are running the farms that are producing their beef. Like they can tell you where the fucking cow came from. Do you know what I mean? They are planting all the potatoes. Now they're doing various awful things to the rainforest and stuff. But at least you can say you're doing awful things because it's coming from your farms or the farms that you're subsidising in these places. They're just like, nah, I buy fucking cocoa beans off Barry, and I don't know where to get stuff.
And it's bullshit. The idea that they would even expect us to swallow that is a substandard product. Absolutely not. No, I mean, the fact that they would expect us to swallow the idea that they don't have any understanding of the provenance of their ingredients is utter bullshit. Bullshit.
I mean, we're talking about 50%. Now, I can't imagine. In fact,
liars.
Well, see, so the way I'm sure here it was talking about there's. When they talk about the numbers, they're talking about in thousands of tons of chocolate being shipped about, like, you know what I mean? Like, so when you're talking about 50%, you're talking about like hundreds of thousands of tons of chocolate that they don't know where it's came from is the claim that they're making. Like,
bollocks. But they're lying bastards. I'm happy to say on fucking record that any chocolate company who is claiming that they don't know where over 50% of their cocoa comes from are lying bastards.
And finally, just so you know, it's grown by 62%. In the last 10 years, the amount of cocoa that's been produced has grown by 62%. So that gives you an idea of the growth rate that's happening there as well. And
I wonder where it's all being grown. It's a mystery. We just don't know. Grown by 62%, could be anywhere. Under the sea, maybe.
Weirdly, though, Washington Post are able to just go over to the Ivory Coast and find cunts or cut and
go, there it is.
This lad says he's been doing it for 5 years. He knows all about it. So anyway, I thought that was very interesting that when we talk about slavery and stuff like that, we're essentially fucking purchasing off people who know they are actively buying chocolate from slavery, and they're taking much the same as when we were talking about when we spoke about in the last roundup when we spoke about the shipbuilders taking their ships and saying, well, somebody else has sold them somewhere and it's not getting any me anymore. It's like taking that stance where it's like, well, I buy it off these companies and I don't know where they're coming from, even though they know that there's like tons and tons of it a year coming from Chelsea.
All it is plausible deniability. That's, they're taking advice from scumbag lawyers and they're making sure that they've distanced themselves by 2 or 3 steps so that they have no legal obligation and they can operate without having it kind of tarring their name. Although we're here to tell you that it is tarring their name and fuck them, right? So keep listening to us. We'll tell you the truth.
And stop buying chocolate, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much. What about are like those blacks people? Are they okay? Not just black people. Obviously,
are black people okay?
they're super okay.
Green and blacks, isn't it?
That's the one. That's the one. Fucking hell, yeah, that's it. If I'd have just said that name, it would have been a lot less weird.
So, like I said, these were focused on the largest companies, but the problem that you've got is most of the cocoa in the world is grown from that region, and it's an endemic issue that's there. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I don't really like chocolate that much, so it's not a big issue for me. I'll just not be having any more of their stuff. So moving on, then we've got a few things. Do you want to have? I suppose, like, because we're on the Black Lives Matter thing, and it's not entirely relevant, but it's kind of pulls into it a wee bit. Would be the Marcus Rashford story. That in the midst of all of the Black Lives Matter stuff, in the midst of COVID, in the midst of the Westminster government refusing to pledge providing meals to children who were not in school during the summer, something which happened apparently at the time when Marcus Rashford was a kid at school, and that he benefited from enormously and chose to spend some of his considerable wealth on promoting and pressurising the government. I'd like to say that the Scottish government pledged to do this immediately and were on board with it. We're doing it anyway. The UK government had said that they weren't going to do it, and Rashford got wind of this and single-handedly, in the space of, from what I can tell, about a week to 10 days.
Sounds like 2 weeks in the mess,
managed to get the government to completely turn around a policy based on public pressure and kind of abhorrence at the stance of the government, which kind of shows you that it can be done.
Well,
they can be shamed into things.
He was donating tens of millions of pounds of his own money. I know he gets a very good wage, but he's a
millions. That sounds.
I'm sure it was 20 million quid.
Really?
Aye, I'm sure that was the overall number. And that's because we had a whole big discussion about it as a group. Go and check that. I'm sure it was 20 million quid.
That seems a lot, Paul.
But that's what we were talking about, because unfortunately, even though he gets a crazy wage and even though he gets all his sponsors and all that kind of stuff, he's a young lad. And it was a massive percentage. I'm sure 20 million was what was the suggested figure of his donations. All in.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'll look that up while we're talking, but essentially the point I was looking to make there was that he's kind of had a bigger win than either of certainly the last two Labour leaders have managed to have against the government in the last sort of 6 years at least. Is that fair to say? Yeah,
I mean, we're falling under a weird environment now where, like, a charity-driven policy by celebrities shouldn't be the driving force for protecting our children at schools. Do you know what I mean?
No.
Like...
But fair play to him. I mean, like, I think footballers are a demographic which is widely ridiculed a lot of the time. Generally speaking, probably deservedly so, right? But we need to give him credit when they do something good. And this is obviously a young man who hasn't forgotten where he came from, you know what I mean? Who has kept ties to the community that he grew up in, and also has a level of awareness as to how important this stuff was to him, and has chosen to pledge his own money to make sure that, you know, kids in similar situations don't fall through the cracks.
So it turns out his charity raised 20 million. I don't know how much of that he donated himself. So that's what it is. I knew 20 million was the figure that was kicking about.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly was aware that he had pledged a good bit of money. I thought it was maybe like a million or $1.5 million or something like that of his own cash, which, you know, is fair fucks to him. It's a lot of dough, regardless of what he's earning, I suppose. And like, the other thing that interested me about it was he kind of got in a Twitter discussion, spat, whatever you want to call it, with a Conservative MP, a female Conservative MP, whose name I'm just going to check, who essentially kind of challenged him a little bit on his kind of plea to help disadvantaged children. And it was Theresa Coffey's response. So he essentially had said, when you wake up this morning and run your shower, take a second to think about parents who have had their water turned off during lockdown. And she chose to reply and say, water can't be disconnected though. And he was like, well, yeah, what I meant was fucking electricity that heats the fucking water, you know, although he didn't say it like that. And actually, that was the point I was going to make, is because that's what I would have said. And this is why I've never changed Conservative policy. He was actually like dead, sort of very considered and calm and clear in the way that he responded to her. He wasn't argumentative. He didn't seek to score points. He just kind of engaged her quite calmly, quite sensibly, and quite earnestly, and pretty much shamed her into apologising to him because of the way that he dealt with her. And there's probably a fair amount that we could all learn from that, and in this environment that we live in.
I will say that credit where credit's due, other big companies are part of that donation of 20 million quid. Essentially, some big companies did step in when it was getting to like 7 or 8 million and donate like huge chunks of money. It's not specifically broke down. And I believe some of the supermarket chains were listed as being part
Jumping
of that.
on the bandwagon.
Well, I mean, like definitely. Like I was going to try. Like I'm not.
And writing off corporation tax to charitable donations.
Tesco, Sainsbury's, and Asda have all donated logistics support and financial like donations.
Yeah, I mean, again, you could be cynical and argue that Marcus Rashford can chalk all that off against his taxes too, but still, like, it was clearly something that the boy cared about, and I think it's a great win, and it shows that things still can be done if we put pressure on government in the right way, and if we don't get all fucking mad partisan. It also shows that as actually majority of polling, when party political allegiances are taken out of it, and when policy is presented neutrally to people, they tend to vote towards socially positive policies. They tend to agree with them. The vast majority of people in the UK think that, you know, people who are out of work should get looked after, that people who are disabled should get looked after, that education should be free, that healthcare should be free, that all of this stuff that, I mean, is essentially a given. And yet people tend to vote against these things when it comes down to a party political vote. So it's almost like the policies are tarred by their association with
it's like
politicians,
the politics of persons. Like it's the like people essentially people absolutely slated a whole pile of stuff that was in Corbyn's manifesto, that there are certain components that were applied during the corona because we had to do that to try and help people, and then it's like people
and
were like, why
were lauded for doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's mental. Like, so essentially, interestingly here he's saying we don't know how long it was going to go on for, and if this would have happened 10 or 15 years ago, it would definitely have affected me as a kid. It's just something that I thought, if there's any way we can try and help these people and kids especially, then why don't we just do it? It's like, man, he's 22. Right, so how can this 22 with a couple of million in the bank in the grand scheme of things have better conscience and better understanding, and now currently a better fucking standing than the opposition leader in the UK to be able to do something when you've then got people who are sitting in fucking Westminster who have got literally 20 times his fucking net worth sitting in the bank behind them that they arguably don't need. Do you know what I mean?
And there's an element of it that's, it's, you know, people don't trust politicians when they raise this stuff, because and maybe they don't raise this stuff enough, maybe they don't make a big enough deal out of it, but I think a lot of the public switch off when they read stuff like that from politicians because they just think it's political point scoring, whereas Rashford, being in England international, and you know, he's got the respect of so many people in England, you know, it means that he's able to connect with the public in a way that a lot of politicians can't.
But Jerry, should we not be keeping politics out of football?
Well, we'll discuss that further in a wee interview that we've got lined up with a journalist soon. So that's Marcus Rashford. It kind of brings us on a wee bit to something that you wanted to talk a wee bit about, Paul, and I've got plenty of opinions on also, which was the kind of Twitter banning of Messrs. Hopkins and Linehan.
Aye, so I mean, both of them are horrible in their own separate ways, right? I'm happy to be on record. I mean, like, first and foremost, everyone knows where we stand. So before we get to Linehan, because it becomes a very difficult thing that we've discussed when we've discussed things like Louis C.K. and the stuff that came out about him and all that type of stuff, where like. And so I'll get to him in a second. But first, Katie Hopkins, she's an asshole, right? She's a
straight across the board asshole.
She is an awful human being across the board, and she deserves to be fucking deplatformed. She's an absolute grade A horrible cunt, and she has no likable qualities. Flat. She is just a dog whistling. Actually, Byline Times done an article about the radicalisation of her that follows our timeline. They put it out
we
this
tweeted
week.
that out. Yeah.
But
it's a good read.
But I mean, essentially, she has managed to get a lot of fame and a lot of money and a lot of support
off the back of being on The Apprentice.
And then being on The Apprentice, and then just being like
something that she shares with Donald Trump.
I don't like either of them. Oh no, they're both been on The Apprentice. I see what you mean. I both of them are idiots. It shouldn't be allowed fucking Twitter. No, I can see a lot. There's a lot of things. They've got a lot in common. So she
both of them have shite blonde hair.
She could do no. One has got shite blonde hair. One has got a wig, dude.
No, I honestly, genuinely believe that that's Trump's hair. Like
it's a comb over though.
Yeah, but it's not a wig, is it?
I guess he's definitely had threading done, dude. Man, there's no way.
Threading's not a wig.
It's fake hair though.
Well, that's not what you said. Just saying.
All right.
Saying. Not that I've got threaded.
Just saying, Paul, it's no fucking thread, it's no wig, right?
Getting very defensive here, aren't you? Because I've got a shite hairline.
What do you think of my fucking quality quiff that I've got? Where'd you buy that, Jerry? No. But she deserves to be taken off. She has been horrible. And the thing is, both of them lost it for essentially the same reason, that regardless of them being awful human beings and saying awful things, they both crossed lines where they started having people pile on, but they started directing people to attack other people on social media platforms. And then that has a spillover into the real world. And that's when it becomes a problem, because then when you've got, she had 1 million followers, I believe, on Twitter.
Yeah. 1 million. But right, so I'm going to get to Graham in a minute, because he's no. It's not about Graham, but just in general, the idea of deplatforming. I wouldn't say I'm against it, but I mean, so blocking people even on social media is something that I don't believe we have ever blocked anybody with our Twitter account apart from. As the podcast.
Yeah, okay.
Apart from like the odd like porn account that fucking like sends you messages or whatever, tags you in and stuff, and you're like, yeah, get that to fuck blocked. But in terms of like general discourse, even people that have been terribly rude and abusive, never blocked anybody.
No, right? I mean, if you look through our timeline, I regularly I'll get up in the morning. The first thing I'll do is I'll check for the numerous messages I've got on different platforms, and then I'll check our Twitter. I'll read through it, and there will be people that like fucking. Well, I mean, we'll go back to him again because I always bring up because we're not mass fans. So like Darren Grimes and stuff like that, they're all there. You know what I mean? Like I see Darren Grimes posts, and I see Boris's posts, and I see pro Trump supporters who aren't Trump and stuff like that, and I see them all there because either they follow us or being retweeted, and it's not my place to say that I need to be able to see what they're saying for me to have an opposing opinion on it. Do you know what I mean? Like, not saying I'm chasing an opposing opinion, but
also you might occasionally see something which challenges your viewpoint and makes you think, oh, well, I hadn't actually thought of it like that. Oh, and look at all of these stats. Well, maybe I'm wrong about this, and that's perfectly acceptable. You know, it's good to be open to changing your mind, right?
Yes.
Right. So the reason that I'm saying, and by the way, there's lots of people that have blocked us because we're on block lists that are ran by certain people. But you know, there's lots of times where I go to read stuff and I'm like, oh, I can't. Like halfway through fucking threads and that, there's comments by people usually in the independence movement that we can't read because we're on a block list that's ran by a certain prominent independence blogger. But even on my own personal Facebook, I've blocked one person in the entirety of my time on Facebook, and I gave that person a lot of chances, and it just fucking wasn't happening. So I just eventually fucking gave up because it was too much of a negative impact in my life. But essentially, the point I'm making is I am against not censorship as such, but just like drowning out voices who say things that are uncomfortable or that I don't agree with. I think Hopkins, certainly for me, in my personal opinion, has overstepped the line a lot of times in terms of being flagrantly and overtly racist and derogatory in her rhetoric, right?
I mean, she's used terms like cockroaches to describe immigration. Yeah. I mean, she's used essentially
in national newspapers.
Yeah. But I mean, but she's also tweeted out as well, so it's on their platform. And I would argue that in many cases, I mean, much the same as this, kind of all comes, but this actually all happened at the same time that they started pulling up Trump for things that he had posted that they had marked as fake news, or they had fact-checked the information that it was posting. Because within reason, they are on their platform and they give them a lot of leeway. Like, as in, there's a lot of things that they say that definitely, if I had posted, I would find myself in Twitter jail. But I don't have 1 million followers, do you know what I mean? And I'm not paying for adverts, and I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, you know, I don't have an account. See, if you've got 1 million followers, you've probably got people that are helping you run shit, do you know what I mean?
Well, you're probably generating a lot of ad revenue for Jack Dorsey.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. So they get a lot of leeway. But when you start using it to coordinate jump-ons onto people and stuff like that, you know what I mean? When you start attacking people, you start posting information about people that shouldn't be there and all of that type of stuff. The thing that the fallacy that seems to exist, and when you're talking about the blocking people and, you know, stopping those opinions and stuff, is Twitter's a private platform. They don't, like, it's up to them what you fucking post. Like, you can post whatever you want, but they can just say, nah, you're wrong, off.
Of course it is, and I agree with that. But there's obviously been pressure from our side of politics.
Everyone,
yeah, to get her off of Twitter and to deplatform her, and Twitter have decided to go down that route for whatever reason. There's an argument, not necessarily saying that I agree with this argument, but I'm not sure how I stand on it, is the honest truth, that deplatforming people like that plays into the hands of the alt-right or the right wing, because it gives them something to play out and go, see, that's what they're like. They won't let us just say what we think. We're not allowed to have these opinions. They're trying to shut us down. They're trying to prevent reasonable discourse, and it's shocking, and we're being put upon, and it feeds into this narrative which allows them to garner followings and which allows them to generate more anger and distrust amongst the people who follow them,
But and then my argument to that would be when they say, see, they're just trying to shut us down, they're trying to stop us having these opinions. My argument is, yes, they are. Because what you think, because you see, because there is a fallacy, and it exists in the UK because of American culture, which is, but I've got free speech. No, in their private platform, you don't. Like, the same way that if you were in work, like if you're in a boardroom, you can't just be a cunt to somebody for being trans or for being black. Like, you can't do that because you get sacked. It's their private space.
It's not free speech to just be a cunt to somebody either.
No.
But there's a lot of stuff that is posted by people like Katie Hopkins, which isn't overtly racist, and which, you could argue is a point of discussion, perhaps, when they're talking about whether it's immigration or fucking, I don't know, defunding the BBC or private health care or whatever it is that they happen to be talking about at the time. I don't agree with most of what they say, but they probably have the right to say a lot of it. They don't have the right to be overtly racist, etc. But this is the reason why it does worry me a little bit, and it's not because of them, and it's not because of people who are entrenched in their views and follow them and support them because they're entrenched in their views. It worries me because of the people on the sidelines, especially like much younger people watching this, who are being indoctrinated and radicalized by their rhetoric. It's them who might see this stuff happening and be swayed by it in the wrong direction, you know?
Well, see, I actually perceive the inverse of that. The way I see it is, if you put them, so as probably everyone who's been on social media recently is aware, like they've all found their way over to like Parler, right? So essentially you've now got a...
What?
Parler. That's
that sounds an awful place. Is that like the museum that they're going to put all the racist statues in?
It's literally put all the racist statues have went, right? So it's like so pretty much all the
cunts half a Twitter going.
That's where they've all went.
Come and see them here, guys.
Well, no, they have actually all went there, and they've put and then so for a couple of left wing journalists had created accounts and that on it, and they're just like, I'm just watching Parler, like P-A-R. I mean, it may be Parlay, do you know what I mean? But it's Parler, P-A-R-L-E-R. It's Parler, you know what I mean?
Oh, right, okay.
Like, and they've just been like, I've went on and logged on, and it's just like Hunter's a racist shouting into the night because there's nobody to argue with because it's only right wing that's on it.
Not even light the night either because it isn't white.
No, that's days matter.
All hours matter, Pop.
Aye, man, that's like,
all times matter. All likenesses from
all likenesses. So essentially, they're all going over to there because they're being deplatformed off Twitter. Now, the thing is, though, it's generally accepted as a rule. Not entirely the case, but like comedians and musicians and the like are usually more centrist, left-leaning in their political opinion for the most part. Not all of them by any means, but a massive chunk of them, a reasonable percentage of them.
Yeah.
Right. So, see if you're young and the reason that you're using social media and that is to follow like influencers and media folk and that. See if they're still all on Twitter. It now means that you've got young people on Twitter who aren't getting subjected to the type of wrong, mind-warping garbage that is coming from people like Katie Hopkins and her followers.
Yeah, but they might... So we know that Reddit...
Well, it was they might actually your argument back to that.
No.
No, Paul, you're right. All right, cool.
We know that, you know, back in the day and around Gamergate and stuff, people were kind of pushed from Reddit towards 4chan, and people who were too extreme for that ended up on 8chan, and then some cunt run about fucking, was it New Zealand or Australia, just fucking shooting folk and live streaming it to people with fucking music playing because they'd been radicalized on those mediums, right? And is there a potential that you're just going to cause the same thing to happen? Like all fucking Katie Hopkins and Graham Linehan and Tommy Robinson and fucking, I don't know, other cunts. I'll end up on...
I was just going to say, imagine what it's like for him. Like, he is now like Katie Hopkins, Katie Hopkins, Graham Linehan, and Tommy Robinson. He must be looking at that, and there must be a part of him just like, I've fucked this. Why am I with those?
And actually, like, there is a part of me that thinks it's probably unfair to fucking lump him in with them. I mean, there's reasons why it's not, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, like, you put them onto Parlay or Parler or whatever the fuck it's called, and then that turns out that there's some of them are too fucking right wing for it, and they go to fucking SS Media or something, I don't know, and then they're fucking like, you know, and then somebody fucking goes around and shoots a bunch of folk in a school because they're like too brown or something.
But the problem you've got is there's an argument to say now that on social media as a platform, people, right, so we've got different issues that they have to address here. Like, so people are going to be radicalised, right? because people can use it as a platform to be able to get people, you know what I mean? They can use it across the board. So if you've got platforms that have a lot of it, like if you're looking for alt-right views and if you are already on some kind of spectrum to be radicalised in, then you maybe make your way over to Parler. But if you're on Twitter or if you're on other social medias because you want to see fucking Kardashians or fucking, you know, your favourite fucking band or whatever, and they're all on Twitter, then it means that you're not falling prey to the people who are pushing this stuff out all the time because they're all over there. Now, you then have another issue that over there just becomes a cesspit of nasty and there's nothing policing it and it gets worse and worse and worse. But all you have to do is try and create a society where less and less people are moving to those platforms and are staying on normal people platforms because they don't because they're not raging about fucking where people go to the fucking toilet and shit. Do you know what I mean? Like pure like. Let's get Graham Linehan, right? So the problem is he has produced tons of media that I like, right? He is as a
some great sitcoms
and stuff. Yes, and like, but he also has such a fucking issue with trans people that, like, to the point where I now see him posting stuff and it's just like, he well fancies trans folk. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's all I think.
He well went to Thailand and fucked a lady boy. Didn't he?
Definitely shagged a lady boy. Now he's worried folk are going to find out, so he's trying to be right against. Like Graham Linehan doesn't need to, like, I can't imagine me and him operating the same kind of life environment, right? So, like, when going to pubs in Glasgow or going to restaurants, they have very different. We have very different experiences when we do those things, right? So, like, who is he fighting this argument for? Like, how often is he in Asda and think to himself, oh, I hope that woman that just walked into the women's toilets is actually a woman and no a trans woman? Do you know what I mean? Like, why does this matter to him? So he's a fucking wrong'un.
Well, I mean, I think it's clear that his wife obviously shares the same opinion as him because he's like quite prominent in like the Mumsnet side of things and stuff like that as well.
Not anymore.
Because a few of them fucking slag them off, right? But it's important to remember that while I personally do not agree with a lot of the objections to like the Gender Recognition Act and the public spaces argument, etc., I do not agree with them at all, and I fully support trans people's rights. I support the right to self-identify and the right to be treated as fucking human beings and to inhabit spaces peacefully. And like, I think it's shocking the kind of a lot of the discourse essentially is based around the idea that somehow all trans people are fucking rapists. Like, if you're a transgender person who has transitioned from a male to a female and you now live your life as a woman and you self-identify as a woman, then you're just trying to get into fucking female spaces to rape them, right? Because one or two people have done that, have self-identified as women and then raped women in female spaces, is the same as saying that, like, well, there's a few policemen who have raped women because they've had the opportunity to do it because they're policemen. So are all policemen rapists then, and we shouldn't have police anymore? No, you know, so but by the same token, I can also understand that as a woman, because I'm not a woman, right? So it's not my right to sort of fucking necessarily argue with a woman who feels this way, but a woman who maybe has been abused or has been subjected to sexual harassment in their life at some point and who craves the idea of a safe space, be it a women's toilet or whatever else. I do understand the idea that especially, you know, older women, like maybe women who are not of our generation, who are 50 and above, and, you know, who aren't as modernised and aren't as familiar with these things and aren't as educated on it, and, you know, fucking some some older people, not all, by the way, not all at all, but some older people just don't like the idea of change and find new things a bit frightening and are like, oh, am I going to get raped? Or are these guys going to be fucking walking about in my toilets now, try to touch me up? So, like, I don't agree with him, but I don't think it's fair to say that they don't have a right to voice these opinions. You know what I mean?
I don't know what you mean. I'm also going to be on record saying I do think it's fair to say they don't have the rights to voice those opinions. Like, I do, as in, like, because I don't think it's any different than 50 years ago, people saying the same things about gay people. And just like, well, we don't want gays openly in our fucking changing rooms and stuff like that because, you know, what if they pure try and bum me in the fucking showers? But, you know, that's because that was the type of mentality that existed. And actually, we've proven throughout history that, in fact, gay guys don't like, I'm sorry, you fucking fat, balding prick with shite bleeding blue tattoos. You're no fucking shaggable across the board.
But
you know
as we were talking about yesterday, there's a different power scenario between a man and a woman, right?
But there is, but then that,
or a biological like man and a woman, like so, like a transgender man who's transitioned to a woman who became a wrestler beats everybody at wrestling pretty much. Like we've seen that, we've spoken about it on the show before. So there is the potential that you could be physically overpowered in a way that, you know, a guy coming into a fucking men's dressing room and going, I'm going to bum you. Like,
I know gay guys that could absolutely, definitely fucking hold me down and fucking rape me, and there's nothing to do about it. Do you know what I mean?
Apart from pay them. But you know what I mean? Like, yeah, of course that can happen.
But what I mean is so then where do, like, this is why it becomes
okay. But Paul, here's the thing, okay? I am not saying that their concerns have any validity, right? But you're never going to engage these people and persuade them that they're wrong and educate them correctly if you don't give them the opportunity to have the conversation.
But the conversation that they've got is based on bigotry and poor education, right?
Right, okay, but there are bigoted people who have racist opinions who are also like not bad people. They've just grown up poorly educated or with the wrong ideas about black people. And if you put them in a room with a bunch of black people, or if you have the right conversation with them, you can change their mind. Like, they're not bad people, they're just ill-educated. And
yes, but you
most
don't allow
people
them
are ill-educated.
But you don't allow them to dictate policy. That's the difference. So see if you're talking about something...
policy, it's Twitter.
No, but it does have a knock-on effect to things like when you're talking about like everything that happened over the equal rights for trans folk in Scotland and all that, and all the discussions, all like the people actively fucking getting support and stuff like that. Like essentially, if the same conversation was happening about black folk, right, we would say, well, those people are racist. We still have to put this in place because that is the right thing to do, and we will educate the racists. But the problem that you've got at the moment is like the trans issue is not being treated that way. It's been treated the way that the gay issue was treated 50 or 60 years ago, which is essentially, we all believe this thing, so they shouldn't have that, and we will fight for their right to, we should fight for their right not to have that. And they said, well, that's not the case. These people should have equal rights. We should educate you, but you shouldn't have a say in stripping other people of rights. That's when...
I'm not fucking fully aware of the entire conversation because it doesn't really affect me. And again, I have argued with people plenty on the internet in favour of trans rights, right? And I'm like fully against transphobia. You know, I think you know that. I've had arguments, like big arguments with people online about it and stuff as well. But my understanding of, not all of the people, like some of them are just fucking bigoted cunts, but some of the people that I've spoken to just seem to have a real fear of the idea of their private spaces being encroached upon. They don't have a problem with trans people per se, but they're just like, I don't want them in the women's toilets, which isn't something which I have a problem with, but I also don't think it's my place to tell somebody else that they're not allowed to have a problem with it.
But if they've got a problem with it, they leave the space. If they expect to get this, they can leave the space because so as a rule in society, everyone, regardless of gender, race, or creed, should have equal rights. Right? They should all be in an equal place. They should all be an equal playing field to start with. Right, and then regardless of what they then make or where they end up in society because of jobs or that type of stuff, that changes those things. But everybody should have the same equal rights. So, like regarding toilets and everything, right? So,
I don't have the equal right to walk into a women's toilets.
Yeah, but you're not. You don't have. You've not. There's two different types of toilet environments in most places in the UK, right? One for people who are assigned male and one for people who are assigned female, right?
Correct.
Now, at no point does that toilet space say born female or born male. It is, are you assigned male or are you assigned female? So that's it.
I think it assumes vagina or cock and balls.
No, why?
Because I think it does. I think most women, if they go to the toilet, assume that all of the people that they are toileting with have a vagina, and most guys presume that all the people they're toileting with have a cock and balls.
But see, you're saying that, right? But think about how many toilets you have used in how many places across the world. Right?
Oh, look,
and how many times has the thought even passed your head? Just like, I wonder if the person in the cubicle next to me has got a dick. Do you know what I mean? You've never thought that. Like, no, that's my point.
But I'm a guy, so I have less fear about that situation.
You maybe do as a guy, but
no,
doesn't mean
as a
other
guy.
guys.
Well, I think most guys across the board, and I think even you can't disagree with this, that if you draw a line across all guys and all women, the fear of sexual assault and being raped is much higher amongst women than the guys. That's a fact.
Sexual assault, but just assault though. Like, I know lots and lots. I mean, it was even brought up in our group chat the other day. I'm not
talking about assault. I'm talking about sexual assault.
But it didn't matter if it's somebody going to rape you or somebody going to punch you to death in the toilets. They're still getting assaulted. You know what I mean? Like, it's like
odd take.
Like, but my point being, I think there's a false equivalence happening here where it's like they're scared that they're scared that they're going to be sexually assaulted by a person who has went through fucking 10 years of persecution and a further 10 years of transitioning to get to the point that they're like that they can be recognised as a woman that they feel like. I would be more scared of of women that are there who were born women. You know what I mean? Like, because they could be a baseline asshole. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like what they're doing is it's projecting this idea.
Again, I'm not saying that those fears are justified or like I don't think that they should feel that way. But I'm saying that shutting down any kind of conversation where people are saying, well, I don't like this because of this, because they're old fashioned, because they don't understand, to not allow them to be able to discuss that and talk about it. They're not gonna get their mind changed by going, "You're wrong, get out." You know. So in the 50s when the civil rights movement was happening in America, we didn't take the stance, we should discuss with the racists to see if we should let black people into fucking white schools. Well, listen, Paul, to some extent in the 60s, like every white person was a racist to a certain extent because like loads of them were just letting this shit happen, and not necessarily because they hated black people, but just because that's the way things were. And they were old fashioned. They didn't really understand it didn't affect them. So they weren't really cared about changing it. They didn't have their mind changed, and they weren't brought around to the idea of reform by folk going, "You're wrong, shut up." It was by talking to people and realising that they were fucking wrong.
I hear what you're saying, but that's not entirely true, is it? I mean, we know for a fact that when Martin Luther King got killed, within 10 days, there was protests across fucking 152 fucking states or something, 152 cities in the US, and there was fucking $4.5 million worth of damage, and then that meant that the Civil Rights Act was then pushed through, something that they were trying to push through for ages before it. Do you know what I mean? So we actually know that it was in fact shouting and just telling them that this was has to happen, and then they have to adjust to reality. because that's the
I think
reality.
that's a rewriting of history, to be honest. But I don't have. I wasn't prepared for this discussion, so I don't have all the fucking facts to hand. We can talk about exactly how the civil rights movement fucking worked out. There was violence in it. There was peaceful fucking chats, and there was, lobbying parliaments, and there was legislation and stuff passed.
I'm not saying that we don't. I'm not saying that you don't have conversations. You still have conversations, but you don't let their conversations or their fear dictate the persecution of another group of people.
No, you don't. Absolutely. I agree with that. You don't allow people to be persecuted. Yeah. Of course not.
So, and then the scenario is, but then the problem you've then got is there's this false equivalence. Like, but if you then say that guys can go into the toilets and be persecuted, no, we're not, because we're not saying guys, we're saying trans women can go into the toilets because they identify as women, and they can. If you then feel personally persecuted, then the problem lies with you, not with society, right? But if you think, if trans people aren't allowed in your bathroom, then the problem lies with society, not the trans person. Do you know what I mean? Like, you have to change society and you can talk to them about it, but there is no scenario where it's like I'm not saying their personal opinion isn't valid. What I'm saying is it's not valid for them to have their personal opinion and enforce it. You know what I mean?
No.
They can have their, but so then the problem is people like Graham Linehan, he's like against trans people. Right, pretty much he's against
basically. Yeah, it seems to be a mad transphobic for no reason. I don't know what his reason is, but yeah, he's been a cunt about it.
I'm positive what his reason is.
Yeah,
so those people, right? Anyone who has that stance, I'm not saying that there hasn't been instances, but like you said, like
it's statistically fucking low, like.
I know, but also statistically, if we're going to play that game, then all y'all better be keeping your fucking kids away from priests and police and teachers, because I can give you a list of rapists and all those professions. I do definitely
keep them away from priests.
No, but seriously though, do you know what I mean? And every single one of them, and nobody's just
serious.
Nobody's like, I'm not going to have my kid alone in the room with
that.
Like, I'm not going to have my kid alone in that room with that doctor when they're performing surgery. I'm going to stand on the top of him in case he's a fucking rapist. Do you know what I mean?
Well, but surgery doctors aren't in a room themselves. But I wouldn't leave a priest alone in a room with either of my weddings. I mean,
the thing is, that's actually not 100% true, because your kids are going to go to St. Aidan's, right?
Uh-huh.
Right? So there's going to be times when you're doing things like fucking what's the thing that you do when you fucking forgive me, Father, for I have sinned? It's been fucking ages since confession.
I never said they're doing their sacraments.
No, but they'll still have to go through a process where the priests are going to be there in the room. You're not going to want them to be sitting down. So they'll just. Well, by the way,
the priests aren't allowed to be on their own with the weddings when they're having confession anyway.
I can imagine.
By the way, when we did it, they weren't.
But there's no priest in the wee fucking confessional booth?
Me and you went in the lady chapel at St. Aidan's and had it, like, the room was empty, but he was on the altar and we knelt on the altar and everybody could see us through the glass room, because even at that point...
Do my confession?
Aye.
My confession was in the confessional box, dude. It's the only time I've ever been in the confessional box in my life.
I only made one confession. It was my first confession.
So the same with me. It was in the confessional box. It's the only time I've been in a confessional box.
All right. Well, I'm just glad you weren't raped.
No, that's not bad. But my point being, like, in all these scenarios, you can't, like...
The glory hole, you know.
No, I don't think so, but it makes sense. Right? Makes sense. But anyway. But my point being with all of that is that in all of these environments, there is lots and lots of statistical cases for fucking, like, kids' football clubs and fucking, like I said, so priests and police and fucking nurses and doctors and fucking Cub Scout leaders and fucking all sorts of shit, right? So if you
a lot of law has changed since we were doing all of that stuff, though. Like, all football coaches, scout leaders, etc., didn't have to do this when we were kids, but now they have to go through the disclosure process with Police Scotland. They have to get their coaching badges. You know, there's lots of checks and balances to make sure that stuff.
But it still happens.
It does, but
much less, but like we're just so does the rape of women in toilets by transgender women. Do you know what I mean? Is like a very, very small percentage. Like, so that's what I'm saying. But the thing is, so you can't live your life by the fact that these things could hypothetically happen and have happened in other cases, because essentially you're creating there's no way for you to create laws.
Again, I think we're kind of getting off the subject in the sense that you're like basically arguing something which I completely agree with, right? I am not saying any of that shit is true or relevant or accurate or worth arguing, right? That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that you have to, or you don't have to, right? What I'm saying is that in order to try and engage with people and persuade people who are actually probably largely reasonable people, but are just old-fashioned and don't understand something which seems quite shocking and different and weird to them because they're just old and older or traditional and conservative or whatever. But if you had the right conversation with them, or even if you just engaged with them and spoke to them, they would change their mind. I think
let's give a platform to somebody like Graham Linehan or J.K. Rowling, who have access to different levels of, but young minds, be it very young and or like proportionately quite young in terms of J.K. Rowling and her books, and then she becomes a celebrity, if you will, that they know about, or Graham Linehan as the kind of mid to late teens up to early 20s. You know what I mean? There's been many shows that certainly all our generations, we were all in that age group and we've seen lots of his shows. In both those cases, they shouldn't be allowed to be fucking...
I mean, just straight off the bat, I will say, I think Graham Linehan's a cunt. And I think like his interactions with people online are ridiculous. I think that, like, I don't have any sympathy with him whatsoever for the fact that he's been kicked off of fucking Twitter, basically, because I think he's went out looking to argue with people on a fucking daily basis. He's been deliberately...
self-righteous man child, like he's a pure dick.
Yeah.
Like he's just like...
However, and I actually have a lot of hate for J.K. Rowling, which I've professed many times. I'm not sure so much on this show. I think a little bit about her support of the Better Together campaign, etc. However, I'm less familiar with her kind of comments on this specific issue. So what she's made comments recently about how the reason, like, womb man has a womb, and so a woman who doesn't have a womb isn't a woman, and that type of garbage. You know what I mean? Like fuck off, man. I know, like, who cares? Like I mean, like, and I don't mean who cares in a negative way. I just mean, like I said, like, J.K. Rowling lives in a fucking castle, right? She lives in a castle. We know that she owns a castle. She is J.K. fucking Rowling. Like, she wrote a book that there's an entire fucking park in fucking Florida devoted to with rides and all that. You know what I mean? You can go to the J.K. Rowling experience in London or whatever. And she's like retrospectively made like fucking
characters gay on it.
I was going to say Gandalf, but that's not right, is it? What was his name?
No, Dumbledore.
Dumbledore suddenly gay and stuff like that. Like, there's no real mention of that in the book, but she just fucking said it because, I don't know, whatever.
When she brought in the new characters, and like, it was like the one of the podcasts that I listened to call it Fantastic Beasts 2 Gay Wizard Hitler, because it's like the fascist wizard who's gay, and him and Dumbledore have possibly, you know, had a relationship or whatever, but then it was elaborated that they did and stuff. So it's like, but why, when she's sitting in her castle, she's just like, oh, I pure hate the idea that woman might still have a penis and is in the same toilet as some other woman that I never go to the Witherspoons anyway because I'm J.K. Rowling. Do you know what I mean? Like, she's no got an opinion on it. Like, I mean, I know, like, she's putting forward an opinion on it, but in actual terms, she is a grown adult. The very idea that you're sitting in your house, your cell in front of your computer, just like, oh, I pure hate trans folk. Get a fucking grip. You're daft, bin.
I guess, right. I guess my fear about a lot of this stuff is that it's a bit it does seem a wee bit part of cancel culture to me, right? And a wee bit part of the idea that everything's fine as long as you don't think something that the majority of people or the majority of Twitter users or whatever don't agree with. And then if you have that opinion, then you're cancelled and you're not allowed anymore.
My problem with that is, see if there was somebody who was saying gays are wrong, or black people are wrong, you would not question, but they say they are wrong at everything that they're doing. They don't deserve to have a platform to be able to just keep on saying gays are wrong or black people are wrong.
I agree. Yeah, I'm sort of saying, yeah, I'm glad Graham Linehan's away from Twitter, but I also think that you're going to lose people who maybe could have seen the light in terms of their ideas, who are now just going to go, oh, they're just shutting down all thought or conversation.
Here's what it's very.
I think the same about Katie Hopkins.
So the question I'm going to ask you is very hyperbolic, but you'll get where I mean here, right? So see on Twitter, see if Mussolini had a Twitter. Would you be grand with him just being on Twitter all the time, getting it pure fascist shit? Just like fucking, do you know what I hate? Like fucking blacks and all that, and Roma.
I guess it depends on what he was saying.
Well, so as long as it was like pure like fucking
Put it this way, Paul. Donald Trump's still on Twitter. Fucking
I want one ready him as well.
Nigel Farage is still on Twitter.
Another one that I reported in the last week. I want him ready.
But you know, these people, I mean, I was going to say, not true actually for Trump, but largely a lot of the people who we are fairly sure are fucking flagrant racists, they're smart enough to curtail their language to the extent that they don't say anything which gets them a ban for Twitter.
So you just wait until they slap up, and then that's what you report them on and get them removed, because they're poisoning people's brains. Because there's this fallacy that exists on earth at the present moment where it's like, well, everybody deserves to have their opinion. Nah, man, your opinion doesn't deserve to exist. If
but you do understand that there's a decent percentage of voters in the UK, maybe 25%, maybe more than that, who would find a lot of the things that we say as offensive.
No, there's a different type of offensive. Like, we're not trying to persecute
not to them.
People. No, because we're not persecuting people based on variables that they have no control over. Like, this isn't like me saying a Tory voter is wrong for being a Tory voter because that's a scummy decision because they're a class traitor, is a different scenario from me saying that black person or that trans person or that gay person doesn't deserve to have equal rights. That's not the same thing. Like, but what I mean is the way that you're putting it forward is the balanced argument that people try and make for it. It's just like, well, you know, I'm entitled to my opinion. Nah, no, if you're persecuting someone based on their fundamental genetic build-up, like to say they don't have equal rights, it's no the same thing. So unfortunately, we've got an environment now where people think me like going on just be like, Grimes, you fucking shite Tory prick, is the same as him going on just saying all trans women shouldn't be allowed to use certain toilets. Like, they're like, because they're no the same things, you know what I mean?
And all of that ignores the fact that, like, we have unisex toilets in many fucking outlets and restaurants and fucking eateries and stuff in this country, and lots in other European countries, regardless of fucking what gender you identify as. But Paul, listen,
things that are called toilets and houses.
If we always just agreed with you, it'd be a boring show, mate.
No, I know. But
no. And I'm also like, I'm trying to say, I don't really disagree with you, but you know, sometimes we need to have the fucking. Sometimes we need to have the discussion. I know it's a bit to run through.
No, I'm not like against it in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying that, like that's where exactly what you said is where the issue lies. The idea that it's like, I'm offended by what they're saying. I'm all for people saying things that offend folk. Frankie Boyle offends people all the time, right? but he's no stripping away civil liberties from another group based on a dislike of a certain thing.
I mean, he has said some nasty things about disabled people and stuff in the past.
He didn't say disabled people shouldn't exist, or disabled people shouldn't be allowed to use toilets, or we should remove fucking ramps for all shops so disabled people have to sit outside in the rain. That would be psychotic. Do you know what I mean? But that's essentially what people are saying about trans folk, or what people say about black folk, or what people say about gay folk. And that's where the problem lies.
I just think, I do think that, and this is my opinion. My opinion is that trans people deserve all of our support, and I do support them. And I hope if you're a trans person listening to this, you understand that I support you and I'm an ally. I really am. However, my worry is that because this is so new to such a large segment of society, and they're so conservative and backwards in their views, that by shutting down any conversation over it, it's going to have the opposite reaction from what we would all like. And what we would all like is for trans people to be widely accepted in our society, and that's what I want to see. So I think that, unfortunately, that means biting your tongue and having strained conversations with people who have quite backwards views in order to try and make them understand the wrongness of their beliefs, rather than just going, "No, you're wrong, fuck off." You know?
Yes, but I agree that you have to have conversations with people to try and make change your opinion. I don't agree that you should be allowed to have people who have got 1 million followers spouting out what is essentially hate speech.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah.
So see if a woman is genuinely concerned, I'm happy to sit down with her and discuss for ages before I point out that I'm not the right person to be talking about this, because I'm like a fat white bearded cunt. You know what I mean? Like what if a white bearded straight Christian is not the person that you should be discussing?
But you'd be able to go, you should read this, or you should follow this person.
I'll tell you these things. But people like Graham Linehan don't deserve to have a platform to just spout hate, because he becomes a dangerous factor because he has got the ability to fucking shape the minds of people. You know what I mean? He essentially becomes like, this is an extreme example, but see, like fucking Mosley and his black shirts in fucking Birmingham, do you know what I mean? Like, that's because he was allowed to have platforms and say to people and twist things and make it. So and the only way you get rid of him is by fucking getting rid of him. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not suggesting we use the extreme methodology, and we definitely have friends that suggest we would agree that we should, but you don't use quite as extreme methodology. Like I said, in this day and age, people who maybe have fascist beliefs, you don't need to be fucking fighting them in a battlefield or string them upside down. You can try and talk to them and explain to them and show them where the error of the ways is. However, people who have huge support and following, who constantly produce fascist beliefs, have to be shut down, because they're the ones who are driving those fascist beliefs. They're the ones that are qualifying it, and they're the ones that are spreading it.
Yeah, and they're the ones that are making it acceptable. Socially acceptable. Yeah, I agree with that. Cool.
Nice.
So
we mid-podcast trans battle. That's what it's called, isn't it?
I hope not, because I won't come off well in the comments.
The thing is, you weren't saying anything like I say. I just greatly disagree, because my fear is like, when you end up having a society that's just like, oh, some of us think this is okay, but some of us think this is wrong and we should discuss it, you end up getting Alan Turing getting fucking put in jail and chemically castrated and committing suicide, even though he fucking saved the entire fucking country during the war. Do you know what I mean? Because
I think that's extreme, and I don't think
as extreme.
I would like to think that wouldn't happen nowadays. But
yes, I know. But what I'm saying is we have historical proof that treating it as something that should be, that people can have polarising opinions on, and not that it's a civil liberties thing.
But the same token, I watched Jojo Rabbit the other day with the missus, and I got a wee bit paranoid halfway through that, like, you know, fascism does seem to be ramping up in this country, and like say it did go full blown fucking fascist, say our government did just start doing what the fuck they wanted, like me and you get fucking rounded up tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Why?
So, yeah.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. No, I wouldn't. I'd fucking try it.
You know what I mean?
We're a very different environment.
So, I think we'll kind of need to get on to a bit of the kind of COVID-y fucking stuff, and like particularly, so Barnum fucking Castle, man, that fucking Durham, Cummins' trip to Durham happened since we've done our last.
All those words you said there are quality, because it's just like Barn, Castle, Cummins, trip, eye test, Castle, journey, trip, too far, doesn't make any sense. Like, it's just like the thing is, the beauty is it's no going away still. Like, I mean, it's certainly on the back burner, but there's still people just making sure that they niggle at it all the time.
He's got away with it, though. He's got away with it.
It's put a black mark on him for a lot of people.
I think
He managed to get away with electoral fraud, so swings and roundabouts, really, isn't it?
Yeah. But for me, it just illustrated the truth of the matter, which is that this government will lie. They will just lie to the public. They don't care, and they're happy to just go, like, they're going down the route of Donald Trump and the stuff that we were discussing earlier, where all media is bad, it's fake news, it's media scam.
It's got media.
Yeah.
It's got media. That came straight off the back of the Dominic Cummings stuff.
You know, so they are happy to let him ride out his fucking job, despite the fact that he, who was involved heavily in making and setting the agenda for, you know, what the rules were for the lockdown and everything else, flagrantly disregarded them. The same Tory ministers and members of cabinet who were really happy to turn the screw when it was the Scottish Chief Medical Officer, and who did go from her job because, you know, I think
she shouldn't have been setting it, because in fairness, as everybody accepted, setting advice and then ignoring the advice means you're a hypocrite.
Yeah, you have to go.
Just walk.
You have to go.
Work.
And Sturgeon kind of fucking, like, I think it took her 24 hours, but she fucking went, you know.
Well, I mean, see if anyone is listening to us right now and they are, I mean, I can't imagine it, but like we said, it's good to listen to opposing opinions, and I even listen to some podcasts that I find the presenters absolute roasters at times that I don't agree with their political opinions, but, you know, it gives me their stance or their understanding of that, right? So say people are listening to us, right? See what you have definitely been shown out of this.
Yeah.
Dominic Cummings fucking hates you. Oh, no, wait. Dominic Cummings thinks you are fucking stupid.
Oh, yeah, he doesn't hate you.
Right? No, he doesn't hate you.
He doesn't think you're worthy of hate. He just has
exactly.
absolute disdain for you.
He thinks you are fucking stupid, right? And see, honestly,
right.
see, honestly, so, no, that's not where I was going with that. No, but he does. He thinks you're fucking stupid. Like, and he has shown that. He's just like, so I went up to the fucking castle. Was it your wife's birthday? I saw her wife's birthday, I don't care. So I was driving a bit with my way, and I couldn't see it one eye and all that. My wife was just like, you better not crash. So we drove for a wee bit, and then I was just like, I'm not going to drive. And then we weren't there. I didn't get out of the car, apart from when I did get out of the car. And I could see, but I couldn't see, and I was out. And then my wife was out, and I went to see my wife, and she was out. And then I came back to work, and I licked every cunt in the cabinet. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just like,
so much of it was wrong. But I mean, like, even if we just take the press conference in isolation, so revealing in so many, like the kind of palliness that was obvious between like him. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah.
There's no legal standpoint for him to be able to do that. In fact, there is a standpoint that says legally he's not allowed to do that.
Yeah, definitely not. But what I was going to say was like the palliness between him and some of the journalists, like even though they were, you know, kind of giving him difficult questions in quotation marks, but like Peston, Kunsberg, you know, people who he has fed information to. For me, anyway, my reading of it was that they gave him a bit of an easy ride. Some of the other journalists came up there with questions that they clearly prepared before they heard the statement. And because, like, nobody asked him anything that was in any way reactive to any of the stuff that he'd said. So nobody questioned him on like the eye test stuff. Nobody questioned him on the fact that it was his wife's birthday. Nobody questioned him on like, well, did you fucking no need to stop for petrol or whatever, like for fuck's sake? Or question about the fact that actually the house is registered in your name, mate. So it's your second home, you know.
Or just the sheer logistics, like, so you're telling me that the plan was drive to there and drive back rather than drive more than half the distance to where you were going to go anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like it's in the distance for him to drive to the place, make sure his eyes are okay, and then drive back. And also, his fucking wife drives.
Can your wife drive?
Yeah, because she can drive it. We know that she drives.
Here, Dom, you said that you ran home because your wife was sick. We suspected COVID. And then after a couple of hours, you went back to your work, which is exactly the opposite of the advice you've been giving everybody. You know, like none of what he done was okay, but it was all accepted by Boris. We were repeatedly told that the matter is closed. The matter is closed. The matter is closed. And how can you expect the fucking general public to take on board what your guidance is when you've essentially said, it doesn't really matter.
Like, I don't know how I could be, like, I couldn't be a journalist at that press conference, and when they're asking questions, no, stand up and go, wait. So you got in the car, like, so you thought you couldn't see, so you put your young child in a car and your wife in a car, then you drove fast on a motorway somewhere thinking that your eyes might fail, and we're all going to say that's okay. I mean, it's not even legal.
It's the most utterly nonsensical fucking... I mean, I love as well the fact that, like, there's a whiteboard somewhere in fucking Whitehall with all the ideas that they didn't go with written on it. Like, that was the best they could come up with.
Can we say I was a robot? Can we say I was replaced by a robot? Nah, robots sound stupid. Just say you had went blind, so went driving when you're wearing the motor.
What about I say I was possessed by a demon?
The other bit that I don't get is, see, because of the position that Dominic Cummings holds, and we actually spoke about this at the time, like there is no way in my mind that we don't have the facilities in place to be able to get Dominic Cummings back down to work from where he was, utilising the police, secret service, helicopters that are owned by the government, a new fucking fancy painted plane. I mean, like, we have literally, like, you know what I mean? Like, and that's not including just, like, is there no, like, taxi company, like, you know what I mean? Is it like an Uber that he could have just fucking used? Like
there's a million things he could have done. You know, like, I'm pretty sure the government, Her Majesty's government of the United Kingdom, could have provided childcare for a week if it was needed. You know what I mean? Like, they could have sorted something out. They could have had professionals within the healthcare system or something. Like, there's a million things that could have happened.
And the Prime Minister and that have helicopters and stuff like that. Like, how they travel about to places. Like, so, like, if they had to just go and pick him up and leave the wife in the way up there to fucking be in a safe environment or whatever and bring him back down, like, they could have done that. And, like, yes, we'd have all been kicking and fucking screaming about fucking how needless and expense that was for the government, but it would make it a more believable story. Like, it would just make it, like...
But it like illustrates a number of things. It illustrates that he clearly doesn't think that he has to explain anything that he does to Boris Johnson or the cabinet, right? He's in charge as far as he's concerned. He can just do what he wants, and he'll tell them after the fact. It also illustrates that despite the fact that all the polling showed Boris Johnson's fucking, like, public fucking rating going from up here to fucking down there, he still wasn't prepared to fucking jettison him, because in his eyes, this guy's like the most intelligent person in Westminster. If the most intelligent person in Westminster thinks that a genuinely good excuse to present to the public is that he drove fucking 25 miles to check if his eyes were okay with his Wayne in the back seat, then we're doomed as a nation state.
See if he just said, it was my wife that was driving, and And then, even if it wasn't right, saying it was my wife that was driving, and then somebody says, "Oh, but we understand it was you," and he says, "Produce evidence that it was me," because unless it's like just it was my wife, well, somebody must have thought that I got out that door. Somebody must have mistaken. You know what I mean? Like just like somebody must have thought they had seen me in the driver's seat. It was my wife. The car that I was driving was a fucking right-handed driving vehicle. My wife was driving, and it looked like I was in the driver's seat. You know what I mean? You could have seen anything that would have made like I had just got an import at fucking Range Rover, and the steering wheel was on the other side. It was my wife that was driving. I just looked like I was in the driver's seat. There you go. There's an easy fucking lie. Like I'm now a better spin doctor than every single person in Whitehall.
It was hilarious. And at the time, I remember watching it thinking, oh, well, he's a goner now. Like, he has to be, because this is ridiculous. Like, he said about 5 things which are patently untrue and which are definitely out with the guidance that his fucking government have been pushing. And yet, there he fucking stands.
Dude, it wasn't even a cottage. It's like a breeze block building.
Oh, no, listen, it wasn't like nice or anything. It wasn't even nice.
Do you know I was? Do you know? I was sleeping on a double bed.
That was honestly, it was the most hilarious bit. It was just like, you're saying that it's not like it's nice. It's just like a breeze block, like concrete block building. You know, like
the thread count of the sheets was 50.
It's fucking. It makes the Park Inn look like fucking, I don't know, Mayfair.
Like there was only one bidet across 3 toilets. Did you get any idea what it was like in there?
Hellish.
It was absolutely it was awful. There was only one servant room. I had to get ready 2 servants. Like, but it was like that. Like also like.
We haven't even got to the doctor in his own blog to make it retrospectively look like he'd predicted COVID.
What when he was just like, when I tell every cunt COVID was going to happen, listen, like for fucking a year ago.
I'm on record as being very serious about COVID. I've written about it extensively beforehand, and then like all these fucking journalists who are like really clever at looking at how the internet works, who can just go to what's the website called that shows you previous versions of websites.
Don't know. You can do it in the HTML code as well. Like that.
No, but but what's it called? Fucking shit. That's going to annoy me. I'll post it up. But it's like backwards portal. It's not backwards portal. It's fucking something. It's very well known. But anyway, like all you had to do was go on that and see that it had been edited, and then people who were very clever at Java and stuff were able to like fucking point out exactly when it was edited, exactly when these words were added. When excerpts and references were added to his fucking blog post. So he rocked up and he changed that shit the day he arrived back.
He done that like it's a fucking premeditated crime. Like he done that fucking weeks ago. Like before this, like essentially he drove back down the road that day and like turned around his wife just like, do you know what? I'm going to change my blog and now it says that I fucking came up with coronavirus. And then when they're all just like he's driving down tooting the horn and waving at cunts, just like see all these cunts that seen me. See when they bring it up, I'm going to make them look stupid as fuck. So I'm going to write you my blog. I can't drive.
You know what's happened there, right? You know when he said, "Oh, there was a guy that sort of seen me and seemed to recognise me and whatever," blah 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 blah. He's shat it. He shat himself and went.
Oh, he came up with a set like he's been aware of it straight away and knew that he has to make sure there's something in place.
And then, so as soon as he's got down the road, he's been like, boom, 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 boom. "Oh, that'll save me."
And that means for 3 weeks he had all of this plan in place, and he still thought he'd bring up nobody's car. He's got a room full of fucking programmers that he's spending 11 million quid over 3 months for an app with Disney work, and they are relatively bright folk, and none of them are like, you know what I mean? Like,
we also had David Alan Green at the Financial Times like going over the statement that he made and essentially saying, "Fucking, that's been lawyered. That's been lawyered to within an inch of its life." So David Alan Green, for anybody who doesn't know, is like a fucking lawyer. That's his fucking job, and he's he writes about law. He writes about fucking legal shit. And he basically went through the statement for the Financial Times. I think he first done it on a Twitter thread, and we spoke about it with Dan Cagetta before. But he basically went, like, everything that he said there is so qualified and so like it's like legalese almost. He's made sure that he's not in any way got himself in bother by any of the stuff that he's saying. He's not. He's not put himself.
That wasn't the first draft.
Definitely not.
You know what I mean? And the thing is, even the environment, just like on a fucking sunny day and a shirt and all that, and like the fucking rose garden and stuff at the table, it's like, what is this? What is this nonsense? Like what is this madness? Like, who is he? Why is he allowed to even be like? Why? What is going on? It's fucking so surreal.
It was a wee bit Wizard of Ozzy as well. You know what I mean? Like fucking. You've heard about this fucking guy who's fucking pulling all the strings and doing all this stuff, and he's a spin doctor and he's this and that. And you actually fucking like see him straight out of 40 and they're like, fucking, he's a like fucking cretin.
My favourite bit was see at the end of the interview when the guy who was doing the camera work dropped the cup and the cup smashed on the floor, and as Dominic Cummings walked away, his foot straightened up and he was picked up by his Asian lawyer. That's the end of Usual Suspects.
Kobayashi.
He's hand on that twisted and stuff, and as he walks away, he just straightens it up, sparks a cigarette, and his foot straightens up, and he just fucking goes and gets picked up in his convertible car that his wife's driving, ironically, and he just drive off into the distance.
The greatest trick the devil ever fucking sold was
making people think it didn't exist.
Yeah, and he was gone.
But that's essentially like, I mean, because he kind of did do that. See, when he walked away and he was just like smirking, just like those fucking plebs.
Deceiver's Delight, wasn't it?
Aye, man. Aye, Jupiter's Delight. Jupiter's Delight, they call it.
That's the one. So, the other Tory cunt of the moment is forgetting Boris Johnson because he's always.
I was like, it is Boris Johnson. It's Keir Starmer.
No. Oh, I mean, there's Priti Patel. There's actually, there's Matt Hancock, but I don't even think of him as a cunt anymore. Like, I just think of him as an utter incompetent fucking fool.
Like, he's just unfortunate, lad.
Like, he's incapable of fucking stringing a sentence together. He's a fucking idiot.
Like, they stop putting him on TV because every time he's on TV, he says something that's wrong.
I mean,
every single time.
Imagine the government thinking Priti Patel's a better bet to put in front of the cameras than you. That's embarrassing, man.
You had to get out of bed. You just like, I fucked it.
End it all.
Fucked it.
End it all.
He's a fucking awful person. Are we going to talk about your dog that's in charge of? We're talking about the lassie is that the Tory you're going to talk about?
No.
The bird? No.
I don't even know who you're on about.
The lassie who's just been put in charge of fucking shit, who says that fucking black people are fucking persecuted and all that. Wait a minute. I'll get her fucking name.
I don't even know about
her. She's the advisor. But anyway, you keep on talking now.
So I was on about Robert Jenrick.
Oh, right. Yeah, he's another one.
So Robert Jenrick, current
porn, I believe.
I don't know who that is.
No, not the name. I was just saying he's in charge of porn.
No, that's Richard Desmond. You're thinking?
Yeah. Right, you just keep going with you.
So Robert Jenrick is he's the housing secretary at the moment, and essentially he's under fire massively because he ensured that Richard Desmond, the billionaire, was given the go-ahead on a housing development at very short notice in order to avoid a 45 to 50 million tax bill that he would have had to pay for a housing development in Tower Hamlets in London. Now, Richard Desmond, Paul, you might remember, because Richard Desmond was one of the biggest single donators to UKIP over a number of years. He was the owner of the Daily Express, Channel 5, Asian Babes and the Fantasy Channel and shit like that. And yeah, just a bit of a fucking cunt.
So he's not even racist?
Yeah. No, he likes wanking to different coloured women. So yeah, he's just a bit of a fucking scumbag essentially, and was a big donator of the Brexit campaign and stuff like that. So like, because of that, we know that he has spent time in the background with Gove, with Boris Johnson with all of the major players in the current cabinet who were heavily involved in the Vote Leave campaign. But also what happened is that he essentially paid to sit at a meal in the Savoy, a dinner in the Savoy in London, next to Jenrick, who is the Housing Secretary, was the Housing Secretary at the time prior to the general election and went back into that position afterwards. And he showed him a video of the property development he was looking to build. There's since been emails and text messages revealed publicly that he sent back and forth. And he made a donation to the Tory party within that time. And he was essentially given the go-ahead to be allowed to go ahead with the development prior to I think it was the 15th of January deadline, which would have left him having to pay an extra 45 to 50 million pounds, which would have been spent by the council on things like social housing and community development, etc. So it's basically, it's a clear corruption, blatant corruption. The text messages from Desmond to himself are pretty revealing, the stuff that he said. If I can find the details here, he essentially said, we don't want to be given these Marxists free dough. Literally what he said.
Fucking Gino's damn Marxist fucking money. Cultural Marxism, Jerry. It's cultural Marxism.
Well, exactly right. But I mean, it's revealing of what these people think, though. You know what I mean? Like that's obviously genuinely how he perceives the world to be, which is fucking mad to me.
I bet, but the woman I was talking about was Munira Mirza.
Fuck, I don't even know who she is. I've missed that.
You know, she's been put in charge. She's been put in charge of like equality for the Tory party.
Oh, she sounds like she'll be great at that.
And she says she just doesn't. She doesn't believe that there's like racism in the Tory party and all that. Like she's an absolute fucking. She's a fucking wrongin'. She's just essentially she's an Asian woman, so they've put her in that position. But anyway, we'll go back to your story. I was just trying to remember.
Yeah, so Desmond, he told Jenrick that a decision was urgent because, quote, we don't want to give Marxists loads of dough for nothing, unquote. He's made sure that he's sat with this guy. Jenrick knew that he had the planning in place. He's spoken to him about it. He's went away, and the important point is that he was heavily advised by his advisors within the cabinet team and stuff, and his ministers and his civil servants not to do this because it would have repercussions, it would look dodgy, and it wasn't following due process. And he did it anyway, which clearly makes it look like he either felt like he had something to lose or something to gain.
The problem is when you've got Cummings advising Boris, and then you've got one of the main donators to like leave and stuff like that, now being involved in this whole scenario. Like, who is it that's telling him that he has to do the things that he has to do? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, it doesn't seem to have came from Cummings, but there's been photos of Boris with his arm around Richard Desmond and stuff as well. He's also latterly, in the past couple of days, then been involved with two other bits of controversy. The first one is that Desmond has been lobbied for or on behalf of by members of the Tory party, such as Priti Patel, and again, your man fucking Jenrick, with regards to the commercial lotteries that he owns. So essentially at the moment, the maximum jackpot that you can run a lottery out with in a national lottery is 400,000. But he's been lobbying various members of the Conservative Party to bring that up, because he runs lotteries, like the health lottery, like that. Yeah. And he has lobbied Priti Patel, he's lobbied Robert Jenrick. Both of them have tabled questions or, put forward proposals in the House of Commons to increase the jackpot for lotteries out with the National Lottery. Also worth noting that he is in the middle of pitching to win the business for the National Lottery from Camelot too. So he's got the government on his side with that. So it'll be interesting to see if he wins that. I suspect this might have scuppered that, but you never know because they're that fucking brazen. On top of that, Robert Jenrick it's been claimed that he met an Israeli billionaire while he was in charge of making a decision on that Israeli billionaire's direct rival's mining contract for a potash mine in the northeast, I think. So potassium, essentially, right?
I was going to say, how ragey would you be if all you've got is potash? What's the pot, though?
So it's Cleveland Potash. It's a Cleveland base, so yeah, it's like northeast, it's like Middlesbrough way, right? So what happened was this guy is an Israeli billionaire called Idan Ofer, who he had an interesting future, a mining project being overseen at the time with Jenrick. He met him when he was serving as an Exchequer Secretary at the Treasury in 2018. At that point, Jenrick was specifically in charge and overseeing a request by Sirius Minerals. So they were the rival to Cleveland Potash. And Sirius Minerals were struggling financially and had petitioned.
Sirius Minerals and Cleveland Potash just sound like characters out of Harry Potter.
They do, don't they? They sound like professors.
Professor Sirius Minerals and Professor fucking Cleveland Potash.
So, yeah, they like Sirius Minerals were struggling a wee bit with turnover. So they had approached the government and asked them for a bailout, essentially, in order to keep the jobs going. And Jenrick was in charge of it and refused to give them it after your man Ofer.
After he'd been kicking about with a billionaire who wanted the
don't do that.
Don't do that, I'll give you $1 million.
And yeah, it then led to the company fucking being wiped out. So Sirius Minerals had been seeking to build Britain's first new deep mine in 40 years, and they were eventually purchased by an Anglo-American in January, and a step that saw many small shareholders' savings and investments wiped out. But yeah, a spokesman for Jenrick said that Ofer was a family friend and that the minister had notified officials who advised him to step back from the decision on Sirius. Yeah.
I wish I had billionaire family friends. That'd be quality.
But it does seem like there's a fair amount of sleaze going on within the Tory government at the minute. And corruption, I think there's that kind of exceptionalism that the UK has on a lot of things. We often talk about, African countries' governments or fucking Asian countries' governments being corrupt, Arabic countries' governments being corrupt, but there's fucking corruption fucking written all over our political system too, and we just don't seem to be prepared to either accept it or acknowledge it, or we're happy with the fucking status quo. Like, it's an oligarchy at this stage, especially when you've got a situation where the Russia report isn't being fucking released because you
can't be releasing the Russian report if your questionable advisor who's got bad eyesight was kicking about in Russia working as the man in charge of a plane company that didn't own any fucking planes.
Yeah, and if your fucking prime minister's been playing tennis with the cunts, if there's lots of fucking donations rolling in from fucking Russians based in London, but it does increasingly appear that the UK is an oligarchy. And the ridiculous thing is that the donation that Desmond gave to the fucking Tory party in order to garner this kind of support, which saved him, by the way, £45 million at least £45 million out of his own fucking pocket. He gave the Tory party a donation of £12,000 to garner that kind of fucking money in his pocket.
So Jerry, what you're saying is we should just be doing this.
Well, this is
because at this point it's like, I mean, it's not unattainable for me and you to scrape together some money. And if you're talking about what is essentially, I mean, I know it's a lot of money for lots of people, don't get me wrong, but what's essentially low-level money in the grand scheme of things, like it's money that is attainable, that you could, like, you know, I mean, like if I really wanted it, I could shift my motor and I'd have the fucking money there, then and there, like in cash in front of me, and I could just hand it to the Tories and they would give me like a mining contract for the whole of the UK.
This is the thing, like power appears to be quite cheap in the UK, you know what I mean? But that also leaves us massively susceptible to outside influence for any cunt. Like in the US, at least it takes you fucking like tens of millions to influence politics. And I'm not saying that's a good situation to be in, like, but...
Well, you say that, but just quickly on that note, and I'm not saying that they've got a big sway on this, but see when I was looking up the numbers for donations, stuff like that, see Nestle only donate to the political parties at roughly a couple of $100,000, like in a year, like across the board. So like 250 grand between the two parties is all they invest. And I just expected, like I was expecting the number I was going in to see like 20 million quid, you know what I mean? But it's like, I mean, it's still 100 grand, but like in the grand scheme of things, like I just presumed it was fucking massive as well. But these numbers seem a lot smaller, a lot more attainable. You know what I mean? Like they're the price of a house. Like that's
it just for me, it shouldn't be the case. I think like the obvious answer to me is like just have all the parties in the UK fucking state funded, you know what I mean? And I know like it's the probably the least bad solution, if you know what I mean, but at least if the parties were all funded by the state, however unappealing that might be, then we'd all be on a playing field and we would have a bit more transparency. It just seems that we're becoming less and less transparent year on year. We're following more and more the American model. People are becoming more and more disenfranchised. The faith in politics, the belief in the honesty of politicians is being eroded year on year. And actually, like, ultimately that benefits the elites and the rich more than it benefits anybody.
It's like, see when you're talking about buys and stuff, so see the Munira Miraz, because you've been Mirza, right? Mirza. So Munira Mirza is her name, right? She was one of the deputy mayors. She was one of the deputy mayors of London under Boris, right? So she has been put in charge. It's like she's been put in charge of, like Boris Johnson has declared war on the woke. She's been put in charge of the commission and who's in charge of
the war on the woke.
The whole, the statues toppling and all that kind of stuff, right?
Everyone get to sleep.
Fucking go to sleep.
I have a war on the woke most nights with my fucking 3-year-old, to be fair.
So she's the head of the policy unit that's in charge of the race commission, right?
Just the fastest cunt.
Aye. And in 2017, she published an article that said anti-racism campaigners have got a culture of grievance. So she's maybe already sitting on one side of that fence before she enters it.
It sounds like she might not be the best person for that job.
Labour and various campaigners have said she's a denier of institutional racism and she should not be playing a key role in the response to the BLM protests.
But I don't know if you know, Paul, but Keir Starmer today said that the BLM were ball bags or something.
Oh my God! Like Keir Starmer, right? Are we on to him now? Can we talk about him now? Can we talk about that?
Well, I mean, I think probably before we move from the Tories to Labour, we probably need to have a wee bit of a chat about Johnson. Just in the respect that, and maybe we've covered it. I guess we've covered his covering up of the Russia report.
We've covered his Johnson.
Is there anything more to say about him? Bit of a ball bag.
Actually, I do have one thing to say about him.
What?
I fucking him now. He's. I can talk about his plane if you want, or do I talk about that?
Oh,
after?
yeah, no, this is the perfect time to talk about his plane.
Cool. So there's a couple of qualities. So the long and short of it, for people who inexplicably don't know, I'm sure people do, but the paint job for the plane cost 900 grand. Right?
Bargain.
So I asked myself, is that a bargain? So I looked into this. More so
it's
than a
not.
normal. No, so, right, spoiler, guys. It's not a good price for it, right? But it's not a good price for tons of reasons, right? So first and foremost, in painting that specific vehicle, right, they've then made it the RAF can't use it for other missions.
But like secret missions, they'll never notice.
No, they were all painted grey. And it was painted the same military grey as all the other planes.
Oh, right.
And now it's painted white with a big Union Jack on the back of it. It doesn't really lend itself to not looking like a fucking plane with a Union Jack on the back of it. Do you know what I mean? So the Air Force have now said they essentially have to take that out of circulation. Do you know what I mean? Other uses. It can't be used for anything else because it's now been painted as the Prime Minister / Queen's plane, do you know what I mean? The Westminster's plane, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then I was looking at it and I thought, so that's an expense in its own right?
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost, you see when these planes were bought, they were leased by the. I found out fucking hundreds of shit about these. So the government have essentially purchased it for $283 million off the Ministry of Defence.
Right.
But it's part of a higher purchase loan that we're still paying back at $10.2 billion on planes that we bought off of somebody for like actual higher purchase. Like, essentially, we entered into a contract, we were paying this massive amount.
PFI for planes.
But so the
Or like reparations for slavers, that kind of stuff.
See, next year,
we like to drag our debt out.
I'm going to phone up Westminster next year and I'm just going to be like, have you been oversold insurance on a plane deal?
Have you been oversold reparations to actual owners of slavery plantations?
I mean, and we'll do an entire fucking mini episode on that alone, by the way. There's a lot of things that we have to talk about with that in regards to the people who made money and still have made money for all intents and purposes off the back of that I'm not saying they don't deserve to have business and stuff in their own right, but we certainly should discuss the fact that they should at least take ownership of the fact that that's where they got their money from and no pretend that it's not, do you know what I mean? But, so the plane. So see, conveniently, because of the way that they've painted it, right? See, British Airways pricing for planes for painting them, it's the same thing. It's the same fucking, like, see if I was to show you that plane.
Oh, you know, it looks like a plane, yeah. Actually, I saw it was a tweet for Chris Wiley, I think, that basically said, just looks like a shitty BA plane.
Actually, I'm going to tell you why it doesn't in a minute. I don't know if you know this, but so a 777, so like the one of the
777
planes, 777 as they call it, will cost you depending on how many colours they're using, and we'll go with British Airways. So you're talking about 150 to 200 grand to paint it.
How much is it if it's just one colour?
150, I presume. Like, because they were saying a normal plane will cost about 175 grand to paint. So it depends on how many colours you're using. Like, but it can go up to about 200.
I would just paint mine green and white striped.
I would just be 2 colours, it'd be grand. But
only one colour when you think about it.
Do you know how much the paint costs for a 747 when you're buying the paint? About 11 grand. Right.
Should have just got one of them.
So you get the paint, but it's the work hours for the turnover, the amount of times that they have to coat it and all that type of shit. That's why it costs so much money. But it only costs 200 grand. So British Airways could have got the paint done for 200 grand. It cost us 900 grand. Now it's a slightly bigger plane than most normal commercial planes. But
not that much bigger. It's no
4 times.
Exactly. It's no 4 times bigger.
Because if it was, we could all just use it at the same time.
4 times plus. It's nearer 5 actually.
Aye, man, it's fucking. But you also they painted it right.
No, but do you know what? Like, I guarantee, and I can't prove this, right? I can't prove this right now, but I will go and look at it because this is the first I've heard about this massive price difference. I guarantee that whoever done that was in some way fucking tied to the fucking Conservative Party.
I spent 2 hours today trying to find out who it was that done it, and I can't find it yet. I need to find the government contract. You can probably freedom of information it if I can't get it any other way, but I couldn't find anyone listed or noted as the person, because that was my first thought. I thought, man, that number is so fucking massively away from the number. Like, this must be like...
While we're on the subject, I just want to say that we handed information to Byline about 5 weeks ago or so, because we had been rooting around on Boris Johnson's personal donations as declared to Parliament, and noticed that this guy, Adam Baxter, had given him a bunch of money, and then he turns out to be the managing director of a company called Europa Logistics, who were handed a bunch of non-tendered government contracts for moving PPE and testing materials around the UK. So that's how the Tories fucking operate.
So the flags rang?
In what way? Like, they've got the white stripe the wrong way around. The diagonal white stripe.
So see if you're looking at the flag, the left-hand side has the white stripe at the top and the red stripe at the bottom, and the right-hand side has the red stripe. It has the inverse of that.
Yeah.
But that's not how they've painted it in the back of the plane. So they've painted it, the two white stripes with the two red stripes. So the plane, so it's not even the Union Jack is on the back of the plane. It's just like a nearly Union Jack.
It's amazing how many fucking ultra unionist, fucking mad, flag sucking British supporters don't know the right way up to put their fucking flag.
Well, see, neither does an entire company's worth of fucking plane painters who absolutely, definitely have, like I said, like, they could have taken this to British Airways, got it done for 200 grand, and they would have known that they were going to paint the flag the right way because they do it all the time. Like, I mean, it's their bit. They're all heavy into it. Like,
the takeaway is that the butcher's apron has a right and the wrong way up.
It does indeed. Aye. We definitely calling it that. Aye.
So
I was just to be touched that essentially the way it works out is there is no instances of commercial aircraft costing anywhere near a quarter of what it's cost the British government to get the plane painted, and when they painted it wrong.
There is, so that kind of brings us on to Keir Starmer, right?
A man who absolutely would paint the plane wrong. in
a desperate fucking desire to appeal to racists. So Starmer. I
don't even know where to start with him. The cunt's absolute water. Now, right? Are we going to start with sacking?
Well, in fairness, no, because I think that's a big one. So let's get the minor ones out the way. So the first one was that he was retweeted by Nigel Farage and some cunt called Helen Dale, who she UKIP, or where's she from? No, she's just some Australian hack fucking cunt. Basically,
that's actually what it is on her profile. Australian hack cunt.
Basically saying that he had done a handbrake on the Black Lives Matter movement. Actually, if you watch the video, he's basically saying that he doesn't agree with defunding the police, which is hardly a massive surprise from someone who was the head of the Crime Prosecution Service. You know what I mean?
Like, I mean, the position he's in, he's going to have a very specific stance on that. I'm not overly fucking shocked by it. I mean, I will just say, just a caveat to all that is, a lot of people don't seem to understand what defund the police means. We're not talking about just like just not giving them any money anymore. And then that's not the idea. The idea is you change a lot of what they're doing into social. And actually,
you make some of that, you transfer some of that money to social causes, because most crime is not purely an issue of crime, it's a social issue.
So do you know that in America, for example, a good example that I seen used today is the police service traditionally ran the ambulance service before.
Right.
In the US. And then they took money from the police service and set up the ambulance service because the police only had rudimentary medical training, and in many cases
tried to batter people better.
Well, I mean, like, I'm not even kidding. Like I would love that if there had been a joke. But essentially, like what they were also doing was like battering people, and then it was their fucking ambulances that were coming to collect the people who'd battered and stuff like that. And like the governments all just stepped in. They were just like, "This is dodgy as shit. Can we not make this so this is not getting to do with the police?" And as such, the police were defunded, and a new organisation that was set up, which, for all intents and purposes, is now the ambulance service. So we already have examples of this happening throughout history, where the police had a catch-all for lots of
stuff that should have been anywhere fucking near.
Emergency services shit. Do you know what I mean? They were just the emergency services, and then it get broke up into different areas. Like essentially, they seem to. There was a talk of in some places in America them running like the fire engines as well, or having a component part of it, or some of them being. Like temporary fire brigade and stuff like that because they were emergency services and they were deemed as falling under that criteria. But they slowly
the idea of defunding the police is like it's similar to what Scotland previously had done to try and eradicate or lower knife crime, and so they took a lot of money that was being spent on just policing it and stopping searches and whatever, and moved it across to like community outreach, to support workers, to education, to like a whole bunch of different things, community programs, and they saw the crime stats go down massively because they diversified their portfolio essentially.
The same as Portugal with drug rehabilitation.
Yeah, exactly.
By less money getting put into investigating crimes of needless small level drug dealing, and actually start doing rehabilitation rooms, and you know what I mean, like actually invest into them and have it a much larger social component of what happens in the area rather than just everything's under the police.
Yeah.
Which then means that the problem that you've always got is when all the money's with the police department decides how much funding goes to each of these things.
Yeah.
Where suddenly the 15
which will
million
be
quid something.
nine mostly.
The 15 million quid you were going to put into social rehabilitation is just like, well, I mean, we could only get it 5.
Oh, you mean
we could put 10 million?
I can spend all of this on our guys and our stuff, or I could give it to somebody else who.
Or to give some nurse.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and I'm in the police, so I'm a wee bit fascist. I don't care what any cunt says. There's nobody who's in the police who's not a wee bit fascist.
Who likes to hit somebody with a bat sometimes.
There's nobody in the police who doesn't. There's no some part in that thinks social work's a lot of shite. You know what I mean?
Like almost every police that I've ever met, and I know some nice police and some awful police,
yeah.
And almost every police that I've ever met have the stance. It's just like, that guy's a junkie.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not like that person is down on their luck or that person needs to be rehabilitated. It's just like, that's a junkie, scummy criminal.
Yeah.
And they're always going to be a junkie, like scummy criminal.
Yeah. And they were always going to be like that, regardless of their upbringing or anything else. You know, because it turns out, you know, not all police. I know a couple of decent guys who are police, but for the most part,
did you say not all police? It is all police, Jerry. All police matter.
But for the most part, most of the police I've ever met are not that bright.
They're not. But back to Keir Starmer talking about people that aren't that bright.
Well, I mean,
I actually think he is quite bright. I think he's quite clever. He's quite clever, especially if he was trying to be like a chameleon in the Tory party right now. He's very clever.
Do you know what? He's also apparently, or certainly, he seems to think he is. He's got a lot of self-confidence on this. Good at push-ups.
So see if you're ever in an environment, just a rule, right? This is for any up and coming budding prime ministers in the future that are listening to us right now. See if you're the prime minister and the opposition just like, how's it when you come into work in the morning in front of you have to do 50 push-ups? No, did they say, no, you're fucking child.
That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, and it's an embarrassing thing you've said in Parliament.
Are you a fucking adult? Yeah. What is your fucking problem?
How old are you? 14? Get a fucking grip, mate.
And I mean, like, and I reckon if you said that, everyone else in Parliament would just stand up and like,
yes. They just went,
no, but it would have been, they'd have slow clapped.
All right.
And then
the tension would have changed in that.
They just like, because, I mean, without being totally horrible, Boris Johnson, based on purely physical scenario, because that's
Can't do any push-ups.
That fat prick's no doing 50 push-ups, and I can say that as a fat prick, it's no doing 50 push-ups.
You could do one cock push-up though. One is all you need.
I can do one cock push-up, but and then he'll deny it when the Wayne appears later on. But aye, so Keir, it's like there's so much. Like, so like I said, so first and foremost, he has challenged the leader of the country to a press-up competition. Like jokes, like, and then after that he's going to be like, well, I challenge you to give me dodgeball, and the pair of them are going to be like in the middle of Whitehall throwing like, fucking balls at each other.
I generally don't like my toes curl a wee bit sometimes when guys go out of their way to denigrate kind of guy culture in inverted commas, you know, because mostly my feeling on guys who do a lot of that is that they're just trying to get their hole. And then, you know what I mean?
They're insecure and stuff like that. And it goes about to prove
I'm a feminist, I'm a good guy. But honestly, like fucking, see, when I read that, I was just like, guys are fucking dick.
Shite. Man, it's like I've spent the last 3 weeks just reading stuff, like, and even like speaking to my mom and stuff like that, just like, I fucking hate white folk. You know what I mean? and then this week, later on this week, it's just been like, and guys, I hate white guys and all. Like, she's fucking them. Just like, right, so Boris, me and you are going to stand here at the front and see where that fucking metal thing sits, and we're going to put our dicks on it and see what one reaches the furthest. That's what it feels like.
Let's see who could piss the highest, Boris.
How many fucking cans of Monster can you tan?
Fucking some cunt send Marcus Rashford in there to fucking sort that shit out. And on top of that, and this
you just think Marcus Rashford can piss higher? Is that what you
don't know, man? I would suggest that to say that he could would be conform into a racial stereotype, which we're not.
Aye, but I'll say that he can definitely do 50 press-ups faster than the pair of them put together.
Yeah. Do you know, that's another thing. That's another thing that fucking baffles me, right? And I don't know if this is a racist thing to say, but this is.
But just in case it is, we're at nearly the 3-hour mark.
Right. But there's so many white supremacists who genuinely believe that the white race is superior. Like, just look at the world of athletics and sports and look at all of these fucking black fucking people smashing it out of the park over and above what any white person can achieve, and come back to me and tell me how we're the superior race, you fucking idiot.
Like, I look at myself in the mirror, right? And I don't want to be overly derogatory myself, but I look at myself in the mirror, I look at the Prime Minister of this country, right? And then I look at an example like Terry Crews, right? In America. And it's just like, well, he is definitely genetically superior to both me and the leader of my country. And I reckon he could fucking fight us both at the same time. So
I'd like to think that you and Terry Crews would be fighting against Boris Johnson, though.
Oh, I mean, yeah, we definitely will. Equality. I'd love to fight alongside Terry Crews. There'd be a lot of high fives. I think he could pick me up and throw me at Boris Johnson. I'd let him use me as a weapon.
Right, but I suppose,
kind of sexy.
And this is the closer for the session. But Keir Starmer sacking Rebecca Long Bailey, was that the smart political move? Was that justified on the basis of anti-Semitism, or was it just rife political opportunism on behalf of Keir Starmer to get rid of a rival? What do you think?
Well, before today, when I was doing a wee bit of research into the background of Keir Starmer, and I'm not saying this has actually dictated his decision entirely, right? But I did find articles from the Israeli Times and stuff like that talking about how he was going to be a really good leader for the Jewish people in the UK, because he was going to cut out all the poisonous aspects of anti-Semitism in Labour, because his wife is Jewish. And his wife is not only Jewish, but has family in Tel Aviv. Like, she's Jewish and Israeli Jewish, you know what I mean? Like, as in, there's a lineage thing. So I'm not saying that directly dictates the decision, but I'm saying...
Is he Jewish, like, then? Because normally to marry into a Jewish family, you need to convert.
But she might have married out to the Jewish family. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying she's a practicing Jew. Like, I just know that she is from a Jewish family. In fact, it actually specifically does say in the Israeli Times she's from a Jewish family and doesn't say she's Jewish. So it may well be that she's married out the family.
I know, but like, I think, being Jewish is much like being Catholic. Even if you haven't been to church in about 25 years, you're only a bad Catholic. You know what I mean? You're still very much Catholic. I'm an atheist, but I'm still a Catholic.
My neighbour said to me the other day, now, I would like to say this is slightly bigoted and xenophobic, like slightly fucking, like, I'm just going to tell you, he's an old boy, like he's a really old boy, and that doesn't make it okay either, but he was talking about surviving through coronavirus when he was getting in the car with his wife when I was outside tidying up my front garden, and he said, and I says, I'm getting through it, and he says, me too. He says, but we're all right, really. We've got the big man looking out for us. So's other ones that have to watch it, like, because he knows that I grew up. So he knows our grandfather. Like, so he goes to the same parish church as I would go to if I was a practicing Catholic. Yeah. But and like. I was wearing a blue top one day doing stuff in the garden. He walked by me and he's not spoke to me for fucking 10 years that I've lived here, right? And this happened 3 times over coronavirus. He came up and touched my t-shirt and went, just making sure that wasn't one of their tops. So I'm not saying but all I mean is that's the way where because he knows that my grandfather is Catholic, because he knows that I was born as Catholic, regardless of the fact that he knows that I do not go to church, and he knows that I don't go to church because we can see the fucking church for our houses, and he knows what parish that I would have went to, he still perceives me as I was born Catholic, so I am still Catholic. If it came down to the reckoning, if Jesus showed up tomorrow, it'd be like, sorry, Paul's Catholic, and don't worry, Jesus. You know what I mean? For no reason other than the fact that it's like we have a gay friend who talks about the fact that even though most of the things in the religion are against lots of things in his life, he still suffers from a component of Catholic guilt in his mind when things happen, even though there's no justification for it, because he's really, really, really not religious at all in any way, shape or form.
I know, but and
I imagine the Jewish religion is probably the same. If you leave the Jewish religion,
a Catholic, you can't have a wank without feeling guilty afterwards.
I got by that.
I mean, I have a wee bit, but still resonant guilt. Should
get me a wank, son.
Right, I work offshore.
It's all about high reps.
So, just not that this is particularly relevant, although I imagine it will be massive fuel to Corbynite conspiracy theorists. But Starmer's wife is Jewish, but his son and daughter are being brought up in the Jewish faith, and the family attend Shabbat dinners. I cannot profess to know what that even means, to be honest, because I'm completely ignorant of the Jewish faith. And I would love, if there's anybody who is a listener of us who's Jewish, it'd be nice to get you on and have a chat, because I don't really know that much about it. But yeah, so fine. So he's Jewish. I don't really, it's not relevant particularly, but I suppose it means that if anything, he will be very aware of any anti-Semitism in his party and keen to stamp it out, as he has made quite clear in a lot of stuff that he said in public. Rebecca Long Bailey shared an article on Twitter. Do you think that it was anti-Semitic in nature?
No, but I'm not a Jewish person. So I much the same as I can't actually talk for trans folk. I also can't talk for Jewish folk in actual terms, you know what I mean? Much the same as I can say I see what Black Lives Matters are saying, but these are things that absolutely don't apply to me, so I don't really have an opinion on it because I grew up in a fucking very white area of Scotland. But the same basic principle, I actually don't think I know any Jewish people. No, that actually, do you know what I mean? I've met one or two in my life that have been ships in the night type scenario. Do you know what I mean? They've dated someone that I've known for like a couple of weeks or a couple of months, or I've worked alongside them in a big business where that person is Jewish, but I don't actually know any Jewish people. So like, I don't. It's probably. I mean, I know Muslim people and I know Sikh people and I know, you know what I mean. But it's probably the one religion that I've got so little.
Actually, I just realised I knew a couple of. Weirdly, I knew a couple of Jewish folk when I lived in Abu Dhabi. They didn't carry the Jewishness very openly, but they were part of the like kind of Celtic supporters club that I used to go to watch football and stuff like that. Guy actually turned out to be a bit of a fucking dick, to be honest. But I've worked with a couple of folk offshore and stuff who've been Jewish in that as well. It was interesting to chat to them, particularly about, because they were like, a lot of guys that I've worked with offshore who were Jewish were generally pretty left leaning and shit as well, but did have kind of very real kind of fears or like concerns about where Labour were going with Jeremy Corbyn as a leader and stuff. Like, they did feel a bit persecuted and shit like that, you know what I mean? So
I will actually retract. I did work with a programmer from Israel who lived in Israel when I was working a long time ago, and his name was Shimon.
Shimon.
And that had a lot. The first day that he showed up, like, it was, and he like was
check your bed cell.
He was ex-military.
Oh right,
like,
so
lived in
not that often. Didn't have that often.
Like, he was ex-military.
Really,
he had fucking, like,
sounds terrifying.
He was about fucking 6'4", right? He was built like a brick house. He smoked. He gave me fags that he was smoked, like, by for any American listeners of that. And not, he didn't just have like a pocket full of gay folk. Like, he gave me cigarettes. Do you know what I mean? And they were Israeli cigarettes. And I will tell you, there has never been a time in my life where I've smoked a cigarette and thought, that's not how cigarettes should be at all. It was like, have you ever thought
that doesn't that feels like it doesn't agree with the Gaza Strip?
No. It was, honestly, it was the only time that I've ever smoked a cigarette.
Anti-Palestinian cigarette I've ever smoked in my life.
That was like 4 or 5 fags at once. Like, it wasn't a pleasant experience. But he had very. I want to say, no, even like I was going to say, like, very almost on the surface, absolute hatred of Muslims that he had. Like, he would talk about how they had guns that they're working on, that kind of stuff, and he would also just talk about how terrible the Muslims were for like cutting the wires as they're trying to put in new housing developments and stuff. Where it's hard to say to him, Shimon, you're steal the land off that Muslim guy in question.
But like, I've met a couple of Jewish guys who've basically said that, you know, Israel had the opportunity after the Second World War to be kind of bastion of moral authority in the world after what had happened to them, and he was like embarrassed essentially by a lot of the decisions that they had made in terms of the way that they've dealt with the Palestinian problem. Not all Israelis feel the same, and that's why I think that in a lot of ways, it's quite anti-Semitic to correlate any criticism of the Israeli state with anti-Semitism, you know, because there's a lot of Jews that don't agree with the current politics of the Israeli state, you know, that aren't, like, there's a right-wing, there's been right-wing politicians in power in Israel for a wee while now who have been pushing agendas that a lot of left-wing Jews don't agree with. So,
well, that's, I mean, I've always said that my stance is that, like, I am critical of the Israeli government at the moment the same way that I'm critical of the Saudi government, right? And much the same way that, and I've never actually, no one has ever said to me that my criticisms of the Saudi government, I say government, but the Saudi leadership is
anti-Islamic,
is Islamophobic. Like, it's never been suggested. It's because, like, they're like straight up persecuting people and it's shite and stuff like that. And, like, you know what I mean? Like, but when I have criticised Israel. I have been told that I'm anti-Semitic for doing that, and then my reasons behind it are some kind of dislike towards Jews, as opposed to just being like right against persecution, regardless of where it is. You know,
and like from my point of view, I perceive it that if somebody from Israel or fucking America or Australia or India said to me that they were against the policy decisions of the Conservative government at the moment, I would not take that as personally offensive against me, because I don't agree with them. So it's not a slight against me or all people from the UK. It's a criticism of our government, you know. And like, I remember reading a book, I can't remember the name of it, but essentially it was about a woman who drove across Iran on a motorbike and like met loads of Iranian people, and this person said to her, you know, because she was like, oh, you know, I didn't expect Iran to be such a kind of welcoming place and so vibrant and all this stuff going on. And they were like, well, you know, you have chosen to judge us based on our government, and you know, Iranian people aren't our government. We're our own people. We have our own things going on. We have our own culture. Lots of us hate the government as much as you do. And, you know, you wouldn't expect us to judge you based on your government. So don't do it to us, type of thing.
It's like, I certainly don't, I don't judge Americans and like, or American Christians as absolute cunts because Trump is essentially, officially on paper anyway, an American Christian who's an absolute cunt.
Well, I've seen the way he held the Bible. It looked like it was the first time he'd done it.
I mean, to be honest, he was trying to hold as little as possible in case he burst into flames.
Tickets, get your tickets here.
Fucking, so in my opinion, I didn't find the article particularly anti-Semitic.
But the idea was that it was pushing an anti-Semitic trope or conspiracy theory, which was essentially that Israeli secret police had trained the US cops to perform the kneel choke, which killed George Floyd.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that the conspiracy that exists there isn't a bit nuts, right? Like,
but she shared an article which purported that was the case.
No. But that wasn't the question. Yeah, like if the question you had asked me was, should she have been sharing such an article? Probably not. But you were asking if do I think that it was anti-Semitic, and I don't really think it is. Like, I mean, like I could show you lots of examples of the British military, especially actually the SAS. So both the SAS and Delta Force both get trained by Mossad in Israel on close quarter anti-terrorist training. Do you know what I mean? Like they get taught manoeuvres and way to disarm people, and you know, like
Krav Maga. Yeah.
So, aye, man, like just fucking like because they are experts in fucking fighting people in tight streets in the Middle East, and they're fucking real good at it. You know what I mean? Like, but so they go and train. So like, so I'm not saying that it's not unlikely that like fucking Mossad guys have been brought over to the US and teach them how to do fucking restraining techniques that are a bit
documented that Israeli Secret Service or ex-Israeli Secret Service agents have trained some sections of the American police in different areas. And I don't think there's any evidence that the police in Minneapolis were directly trained by the Secret Service or ex-Secret Service from Israel. They might have been, I need to check that. But that's kind of led to this kind of trope and like quote unquote conspiracy theory that the police in America were taught to kneel on people's necks by Israel, and that's kind of been backed up by photographs of Israeli military doing practicing that technique against Palestinians, etc., etc. But I don't think that was the main crux of the article that Rebecca Long Bailey shared. And I think that, like, to me, certainly it reeked of political opportunism on Keir Starmer's part. Like, he could have defended her and whatever. He chose not to. And I understand why not, considering the absolute grief that Corbyn got on the basis of being anti-Semitic. But I do wonder if, remembering the fact that Rebecca Long Bailey was I believe I'm correct in saying, his next strongest candidate in the leadership race. So she's
It's a good way to eliminate threats.
Political rivals for sure, yeah.
Aye, I mean, like, that's how I feel about it. Like, see if I was to show, and I almost certainly can, it almost definitely exists in fucking some form of fucking training in the UK or the US or somewhere in fucking mainland Europe, that some of the police force or tactical forces have been taught stuff. I feel like Spetsnaz guys, if I was to then say, Spetsnaz showed them how to fucking do that restrained arm, I wouldn't be like, it's no a.
You wouldn't be deemed as anti-Russian.
No, I wouldn't be a dig at the Russians. It would just be like, that's
also,
just a method.
There's an element that if anybody thought you were anti-Russian, it would kind of just be accepted because it's okay to be
anti-Russian. It's okay to be anti-Russian. Like, it's okay to you just say, but he was taught to do that from the fucking nasty Russians, you know what I mean? And people just like, well, Russians are nasty.
Russians aren't a race, is what we would be told, I guess. Russians aren't a race, so that's okay. It's okay to feel like that about Russia. I mean, I do feel like that about Russia. Like, I not about Russian people individually, but I do feel that the Russian state has a massive interest in foreign influence and psyops, and it's like, I mean, we because we're kind of, I don't want to say students of it or whatever, but like, we pay close attention to it, and it's a big thing of what we're about, so we're very aware that it's a massive part of how Russian defense infrastructure operates, is that it is out there.
Yeah, and I mean, and actually, further than that, there is no doubt that there is methodology that's used that we have spoken about before, that the British government or components of the British government, especially those more attuned to the right-hand side of the government, have utilised methods that have been developed by the Russians regarding. Regarding psyops, you know what I mean? Regarding that type of that whole, they put a lot of investment and time into the whole misdirection and psyops and controlling the people through media and stuff like that. And we know that it's been utilised, and we've spoken about it before.
But there's also a lot more instances of people on what we would call the left wing of politics in the UK being involved in, like, for example, having their own programmes on Russia Today, appearing on Russia Today. Like, Corbyn's been on Russian TV several times. Salmond had his own show. It's more of a left wing deal, I suppose, in the UK to be involved in Russian media, whereas it seems to be on the right side, they're more likely to be receiving Russian money. Although sometimes you would say it's coming from the opposite side of the Russian political spectrum to Putin. Sometimes it's from people who have been his advisors and stuff as well.
You could almost argue that Russians have got a desire to cause some kind of subterfuge, like cause some kind of issues between them, by funding both sides
and cause division. Yeah, it's weird.
We spoke about that lots, and even though we speak about that lots, no one presumes that we are against the people of Russia.
Russian people.
So the idea that, like, because it may well be, and I actually would have to look into it in much greater detail, it actually seems like it's probably not. Like, the kneeling on somebody's neck to subdue them just seems like a logical place that you would, like, you know what I mean? Like, the same way that, like, see, like, cats and dogs and stuff like that, like, see, being able to pick them up round, like, at the neck, like, at the skin of the neck, gives them the inability to be able to bite back at you or flail their legs because it's a particularly vulnerable bit of the body. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's known, like widely known, that it's not a technique to subdue somebody. It's a technique to cause them serious physical harm and incapacitate them and potentially kill them. You know what I mean? Like, it's not something.
It's like, it's something that exists in lots of other places as well. I'm guessing it's like a standard process. If you wanted to be stopping somebody doing anything, kneeling on their neck is going to definitely prevent them doing a lot of shit.
Put it this way, like, as soon as somebody taps out in a UFC fight, the other fighter lets go of their neck because everybody knows you're cutting the oxygen supply to their brain. Like, you keep going past that point, they will die. So why it would be considered acceptable in law enforcement, I don't know. And, you know, I would like to think that hopefully it's not any sort of officially mandated procedure. I would like to think not. If it is, then you sort that fucking shit out. But what we do know is that black people keep getting killed off of the police in the US on a fairly regular basis.
It's like there's definitely, so if you take something like UFC's used, there's definitely holds and stuff that they do in there that if you held them for long enough, you could easily kill a guy with them. Like, if using Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like, holds, you know what I mean? So, but if I was to say the police force have been taught Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu holds, I wouldn't then be fucking attacking the Brazilian people. Do you know what I mean?
But then it would be like, it would be acceptable for me to say, well, where the fuck have you come up with that? There's no evidence that actually happened, you know? And if there had been, you know, a perceived campaign of anti-Brazilian rhetoric throughout your political party, then you were then trying to blame that on the Brazilians, then it would be reasonable for me to fucking call you out on that, I suppose.
Yeah, no, and the thing is, and like calling her out on it and making her defend it or whatever is totally fine. Getting rid of her over that just seems like it seems like a hollow gesture. Do you know what I mean? It seems like I've got rid of an anti-Semitic.
Yeah, and opportunistic, you know. I think it's opportunistic. And I think it's like, it's easy for him to go, boom, look, see, I'm tough on this stuff. I'm not messing about. There's people who would say that he's received a lot of funding from Israeli kind of funding sources and stuff like that as well. But so have lots of people in the Labour Party. Tom Watson was one of them. He decided to step down. A lot of them have been critical of Jeremy Corbyn, but that's, you know, presumably because they feel strongly about his stance or his inability to eradicate anti-Semitism within the party. But yeah, I mean, we've spoke about the anti-Semitism stuff within Labour pretty extensively, and we've always kind of came to the conclusion that it was sort of slightly overblown, certainly was given a lot more media attention than the rampant racism and Islamophobia within other parties within the UK. I don't know if there's an element of it where people who are in the media are, you know, kind of tend to be, or certainly in a lot of the media that we are kind of consuming, probably would swing more to the left, and there's an element like self-policing, or like they hold their own party or their own politics up to more scrutiny and more regard than they would the other side, so they want to try and police it more or whatever, like in the sense that I would probably be overcritical of like the nationalist movement because I feel like I'm part of it and I don't want it to reflect badly on me, so I will call out shit that I don't want to see within it. Maybe there's an element of that within the media. I don't know. I'm just fucking spitballing.
I mean, it may well be, but like I said, going back to the actual sacking, it just seems like such a weird thing to have done. But even for no real resolve, like I mean, what has it done? Is it to send a message to other people who may be perceived as anti-Semitic to not say anything? Like anti-Semitic to not say anything? Like, is that the idea? Because and then that's fine as long as that doesn't mean that no
You
one
can't criticise Israel at all.
Aye, man. If nobody in the UK politics can criticise Israeli actions and persecutions on the people of Israel, like on the other religions in Israel and stuff like that, and you know that, like, what's like what's the point? And it's like, you mean like, so what? Well, we would now have a country that you can't discuss their politics without it being made into a religious thing. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Next time they'll be just kicking them off of Twitter.
well, I mean, they might, but then there's a difference between being against someone's politics and being against someone's religion. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't believe. It's maybe the way that I view the world. So
I think it's naive to think that there aren't, maybe quite a lot of people out there who are heavily critical of Israel who aren't doing it because they're anti-Semitic. There maybe are people out there who feel that way.
Oh, I mean, probably, like, just because in my head, like, because I don't perceive any government in the world, like, as based on their core religion. Like, when if I was talking about, like,
Saudi are pretty, like...
But I still don't, like, when I talk about the stuff that's, like, when I talk about the bad things that Saudi are doing, I don't think these Muslims are doing a bad thing. Do you know what I mean? I just think Saudi as an entity is doing bad. There's other Muslim countries that aren't doing that. Like, that's not... So it's like, so you can operate as a Muslim country without persecuting people in the way that you are. And by the same basic principle, like I don't know. I mean, I'm guessing, actually, I've never ever checked. In my head, the only state that exists in the world that's religion is Judaism, is Israel. I presume there's no other country on earth, like in Africa, that's like, no, or anything that's got, like, that's Jewish. You know what I mean?
I think that's fair. I think there's enclaves of the Jewish religion in different countries around the world, but yeah, like, primarily, I mean, because they were so persecuted, a lot of them chose to go there, and you can't really blame them for that, you know.
So it maybe makes it a bit different, to the point where if that's the only place that's Jewish and people then see a problem with the place, people then presume that
the problem's with Jewishness,
rather than absolute fucking rank rotten persecution of the people that live in the country, like, regardless of race. You know?
Yeah, and like, I suppose if you were Jewish and you had lived through, or certainly part of your learned culture was that story, and you'd ended up in Israel because of that. They were like, this is the one place that we have, and they perceive it as there's still people trying to encroach upon it and attack it. They would be overly defensive of it, you know?
Indeed.
So yeah, we've got, it's been a pleasure chatting to you, and I had far more to say than I kind of thought I would, if you know what I mean. Like, I was coming at this thinking, not that much has happened. It's all been COVID. You know, I've made a fucking concerted effort to avoid the news a lot of the time, if I'm honest. But turns out, still hate the Tories. So yeah, we are Not Another Fake Newscast, and we have a few cool interviews coming up.
We've got about 80 interviews. Like, we've got so many interviews. We're producing interviews at a level at the moment that is completely unsustainable. Like, it's just not viable to continue going that way. Like, I reckon we probably have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have about 6 or 7 interviews that I know about, that I'm aware that are in the next couple of weeks lined up, and then we've just done about 80 across the last month or so.
But you know, we're getting good folk on and that, and the more good folk we get, the easier it is to get more good folk. So yeah, it's like a self-perpetuating myth at the minute.
For 3 years.
We just keep convincing people that we're podcasters.
I'm like the Kaiser Soze journalism.
So yeah. Thanks for listening to our pish again.
Yeah, thanks very much, guys.
We love yous. Peace out.
Bye-bye. Bye.